He thought he could control everything and brought his pregnant mistress to his wife's graduation, intending to turn the most awaited moment of her life into a true nightmare. But in the middle of the party, the wife made an unexpected move that made him panic in front of all the guests. The glass wall of Samuel Fisher's downtown Austin office offered a godlike view of the city he'd conquered. 40 floors up, the Texas capital sprawled beneath him like a personal fiefdom. He pressed his palm against the cool surface, savoring the satisfying vibration of his phone in his pocket. Another congratulatory message about Fisher Tech's record-breaking quarter. "Mr. Fisher, they're waiting for you in the conference room." Samuel turned to find his assistant hovering in the doorway, her expression a practiced blend of deference and urgency. He nodded, straightening his custom Italian suit jacket. "Tell them 5 minutes, Melissa." As she disappeared, Samuel pulled out his phone. Not business after all. The text was from Danica. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Missing your hands on me." A flutter of excitement mingled with anxiety in his chest. He quickly deleted the message, a habit formed over the past 18 months of their affair. Tomorrow he'd fly to San Francisco, ostensibly for meetings with potential investors. In reality, he'd spend most of his time in Danica's apartment, losing himself in her carefree laugh and impossibly soft skin. His phone buzzed again. This time, his wife. "Don't forget dinner with Dean Patterson tonight. 7:30 at Jeffrey's. Love you." Samuel's jaw tightened. Ilara's academic connections were becoming an increasingly intrusive part of their calendar. He typed a quick affirmative response, dropped the phone into his pocket, and headed toward the conference room where his executive team awaited his arrival. "Did you even read my dissertation draft?" Ilara Simmons Fisher asked, her dark eyes narrowing as she balanced her laptop on her knees. She sat cross-legged on their living room sofa, surrounded by academic papers and empty coffee mugs. Samuel loosened his tie, dropping his keys on the marble countertop of their kitchen island. Their modernist mansion in Westlake Hills echoed with the emptiness that came from having too much space and not enough life to fill it. "I skimmed it," he lied, making his way to the bar cart. The quantum computing applications section was compelling. There was no such section. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon, waiting for her to catch him out. "That's not in my dissertation, Samuel." Her voice was quiet, disappointment evident, but not surprise. "My research is on adaptive neural networks, as you'd know if you'd read even the title page." Samuel swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "I've been swamped with the Tokyo expansion. You know that. Yet you found time for 3 rounds of golf last weekend," Ilara replied, closing her laptop with a definitive click. "Never mind. Dean Patterson is looking forward to meeting you tonight. Please don't talk about Fisher Tech's stock price the entire evening." "Your academic crowd isn't exactly riveting company," Samuel muttered, downing his drink. "All theory, no practical application." Ilara's laugh held no humor. "That theory is what your entire company is built on. But sure, keep pretending you're a self-made tech genius who didn't leverage my research for your first 2 products." The accusations stung because it contained just enough truth to be indefensible. When they'd met 5 years ago at a tech conference, Samuel had been immediately drawn to Ilara's brilliant mind and the applications her research could have for his fledgling company. Their whirlwind romance had been genuine on both sides, but he couldn't deny that her expertise had given Fisher Tech a critical edge in those early days. "That's not fair," he said, setting down his glass harder than necessary. "You were compensated with equity. Equity that's now worth—" "I didn't want to be compensated, Samuel. I wanted to be a partner." Ilara stood, gathering her papers with sharp, angry movements. "But I've always been an asset to you, haven't I? Never an equal." Before he could respond, she disappeared into their home office, the door closing with quiet finality behind her. Samuel poured another drink, battling the uncomfortable sensation in his chest. Guilt, frustration, or perhaps something worse. The realization that somewhere along the way, he'd stopped seeing his wife as the extraordinary woman he'd fallen for. His phone vibrated with another text from Danica, a photo this time, one he quickly closed before anyone could see. With Danica, everything was simple. She laughed at his jokes, marveled at his accomplishments, and never challenged him on anything that mattered. With Ilara, he always felt like he was falling short of some invisible standard. Jeffrey's restaurant hummed with the quiet conversation of Austin's elite. Crystal glasses clinked softly against white tablecloths as Samuel performed the role of attentive husband, feigning interest in Dean Patterson's verbose descriptions of the university's expansion plans. "Your wife's research is truly groundbreaking," Patterson said, his eyes crinkling with genuine admiration as he glanced at Ilara. "The applications for predictive modeling alone could transform multiple industries." "Samuel knows all about my work," Ilara said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "He's been my sounding board through the entire process." The lie was offered graciously, Samuel realized, a lifeline thrown to preserve his dignity in front of the university dean. He didn't deserve her protection, yet she gave it without hesitation. "Absolutely," Samuel joined in, raising his wine glass. "To the soon-to-be Dr. Simmons Fisher, the brightest mind in the room, always." Ilara's expression softened slightly at the toast, a glimpse of the warmth that had once flowed freely between them. The evening progressed pleasantly enough, with Samuel making a genuine effort to engage with Patterson's academic perspectives. As they waited for dessert, Ilara excused herself to the restroom, leaving the men alone. "You have an extraordinary wife, Mr. Fisher," Patterson said, once Ilara was out of earshot. "Her doctoral defense next month is already generating buzz among faculty. MIT and Stanford have both expressed interest in recruiting her." Samuel's hand tightened around his wineglass. "Recruiting her? Oh, I assumed she'd discussed this with you," Patterson backpedaled, clearly uncomfortable. "Several prestigious research institutes have reached out about positions once she completes her doctorate." "No," Samuel said flatly. "She hasn't mentioned anything about relocating." The conversation shifted awkwardly to safer topics, but Samuel's mind raced. MIT, Stanford, both thousands of miles from Austin, from the life they'd built, from his company, from Danica. When Ilara returned, he studied her face, searching for signs of deception. Would she really consider leaving? Or was this another symptom of the growing distance between them? Plans made in silence, futures imagined without each other in them. The drive home was quiet, streetlights casting intermittent shadows across Ilara's profile. Samuel gripped the steering wheel of his Tesla, questions burning in his throat, but unable to find voice without revealing Patterson's inadvertent disclosure. "You were almost pleasant tonight," Ilara finally said, breaking the silence. Patterson was impressed. "He mentioned job offers," Samuel replied, eyes fixed on the road. "From MIT, Stanford." Ilara's intake of breath was almost imperceptible. "Those are preliminary inquiries, not offers. When were you planning to tell me?" "When there was something concrete to discuss." She turned toward him. "I've spent 5 years supporting your career, Samuel. 5 years putting my ambitions second. Is it so unthinkable that I might want to pursue opportunities of my own? In Boston? In California? What about us?" Ilara laughed softly, the sound tinged with sadness. "That's rich, coming from someone who's barely home 3 nights a week. When was the last time you asked about my day without checking your phone mid-answer?" The accusation hung in the air between them, uncomfortably accurate. Samuel navigated the winding roads of their neighborhood, expensive homes concealed behind manicured landscaping and security gates. "I built all this for us," he finally said as they pulled into their driveway. "No," Ilara replied quietly. "You built it for yourself. I was just part of the aesthetic." She exited the car before he could respond, her words striking with surgical precision at the truth he'd been avoiding. 3 days later, Samuel sat in a sun-drenched cafe in San Francisco's Mission District, watching Danica stir her latte. At 28, she radiated the carefree confidence of someone untouched by significant failure. Her red hair caught the light, creating a halo effect that seemed appropriate for a woman who had become his escape from reality. "You seem distracted," she said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Tokyo investors giving you trouble?" "Just the usual corporate politics," he lied. "Nothing worth discussing." Danica smiled, accepting his deflection without question. One of the qualities he most appreciated about her. She never pushed, never demanded more than he was willing to give. "I have something to tell you," she said, her expression shifting to something more serious. "And I don't know how you're going to take it." Samuel's heart rate quickened. In 18 months of their affair, he'd never seen this particular look on her face. "I'm pregnant," Danica said, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 weeks. The world seemed to tilt beneath him. Samuel's mouth opened, but no words emerged. "I know this wasn't planned," she continued, misreading his shock as displeasure. "And I know your situation is complicated, but pregnant. he repeated, the word foreign on his tongue. I'm keeping it, Danica said firmly. I wanted you to know, but I don't expect anything from you. Samuel's mind raced through calculations and possibilities. Ilara had been clear from the beginning about postponing children until her career was established. They'd agreed, theoretically, to revisit the conversation after her doctorate was completed, but in recent years, the topic had fallen away entirely, lost in the growing silence between them. And now Danica, vibrant, uncomplicated Danica, was carrying his child. Say something, she pleaded. What happened next surprised even Samuel. A smile spread across his face, followed by a laugh, not of mockery, but of unexpected joy. A baby, he said, reaching for her hands. My baby. Danica's eyes widened. You're happy about this? I think I am, Samuel replied, the truth of it dawning on him with each passing second. I really think I am. As their fingers interlaced across the table, Samuel felt a door opening somewhere in his mind, a possibility he hadn't allowed himself to consider until this moment. A clean break, a new start, a family built on joy rather than obligation and resentment. What about your wife? Danica asked, voicing the question that hovered between them. Samuel squeezed her hand. Let me worry about that. On the flight back to Austin that evening, Samuel drafted and deleted a dozen different confessions to Ilara. None of them captured what he needed to say, how to explain that he'd found happiness in betrayal, possibility in deception. As the plane descended through Texas clouds, a realization crystallized in his mind. There was no perfect way to dismantle a marriage, no gentle method to reveal a double life. Whatever path he chose would cause pain, but delaying the inevitable would only increase the damage. Ilara deserved the truth, however ugly, and Samuel, for all his flaws, needed to find the courage to provide it. His phone chimed with a message as the plane touched down. Not Danica this time, but Ilara. Need to talk when you get home. Important news about my future. About our future. Samuel stared at the screen, a chill spreading through his body. Had she somehow discovered the affair? Or was this about the job offers, a decision already made without his input? Either way, the careful compartmentalization of his life was about to collapse. The only question remaining was whether he would control the demolition or be crushed beneath the falling debris. Samuel's Uber crawled through Austin's evening traffic, each red light amplifying his anxiety. The driver, sensing his passengers' tension, abandoned attempts at small talk after receiving only curt responses. Samuel's thumb hovered over Ilara's message, tempted to ask for clarification, but reluctant to engage before seeing her face to face. Whatever important news awaited him, he preferred to gauge her emotions in person. When the car finally pulled into their circular driveway, Samuel noticed an unfamiliar BMW parked near the entrance. Visitors at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday was unusual for them. He paid the driver and approached his front door with mounting unease, keys jangling in his trembling hand. The sound of laughter, Ilara's laughter, genuine and unrestrained, greeted him as he entered. Following the voices to the living room, Samuel found his wife seated on the sofa beside a man he didn't recognize. Tall and lean with salt and pepper hair, the stranger exuded academic confidence in his casual blazer and jeans. "Samuel!" Ilara stood, her smile bright but eyes cautious. "I wasn't sure when you'd be back. This is Dr. Nathan Whitman from MIT's Computer Science Department." Whitman rose, extending his hand. "The famous Samuel Fisher. I've followed your company's rise with interest." Samuel shook the offered hand mechanically. "MIT, I see. Nathan flew in specifically to discuss the research fellowship," Ilara explained, a hint of defiance in her tone. "We were just going over the details. In our living room at night." Samuel couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "The official meeting was at the university this afternoon," Whitman interjected smoothly. "This is more of a casual follow-up. I don't want to intrude on your evening." "Yet, here you are," Samuel replied, dropping his bag on a chair. An uncomfortable silence fell across the room. Ilara's smile had vanished, replaced by the tight-lipped expression Samuel recognized as controlled anger. "Nathan was just leaving," she said, shooting Samuel a warning glance. "But we'd love to continue this conversation over breakfast tomorrow. The cafe at the Four Seasons, perhaps? They have those ricotta pancakes you mentioned." Whitman nodded, gathering his tablet and notebook. "Perfect. 9 a.m. His eyes darted between the couple, clearly sensing the tension. "Mr. Fisher, you're welcome to join us, of course. I have a company to run," Samuel replied flatly. "But don't let that stop you." "I'll walk you out," Ilara told Whitman, deliberately avoiding Samuel's gaze. Left alone, Samuel poured himself a generous bourbon, downing half before Ilara returned. The alcohol did little to calm the storm brewing inside him, a toxic mixture of guilt over his own deception and irrational possessiveness over his wife's potential departure. When Ilara returned, her steps were measured, controlled. That was completely unprofessional. "Having a strange man in our home at night while I'm away is what strikes me as unprofessional," Samuel countered. "He's the head of the department I've dreamed of working with since graduate school." Ilara's voice remained calm, but her eyes flashed dangerously. "And we were discussing the most significant opportunity of my career." "In Boston," Samuel stated flatly. "Yes, in Boston." Ilara crossed her arms. "The fellowship is for 3 years, with a tenure-track position afterward if things go well." Samuel stared at her, searching for signs of hesitation. "You've already decided to accept." It wasn't a question, but Ilara answered anyway. "I wanted to discuss it with you first, but yes, I'm strongly considering it." "What about us? What about our life here?" Ilara laughed, the sound hollow. "What life, Samuel? You're never home. When you are, you're distracted or working. We haven't had a real conversation in months." Samuel set down his glass, struggling to navigate the conversation without revealing his own duplicity. The irony wasn't lost on him. Anger at his wife's potential departure, while he himself had been plotting an exit. "We built something here," he said finally. "A partnership. Did we? Or did I just orbit around your success, applauding from the sidelines?" Ilara moved to the window, gazing out at the manicured garden, illuminated by landscape lighting. "I've spent 5 years supporting your ambitions. 5 years watching you build your empire while putting my career second. You were compensated well for any contributions to Fisher Tech," Samuel replied defensively. Ilara turned, her expression a mixture of hurt and disbelief. "Is that all our marriage is to you? A business arrangement, compensation for services rendered?" Before Samuel could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Danica. He ignored it, but the damage was done. Ilara had noticed his instinctive reach toward the device. "Go ahead," she said bitterly. "Whatever crisis at work clearly can't wait." "It's nothing," Samuel insisted, leaving the phone untouched. Ilara studied him with the analytical precision that made her such a formidable academic. "You know what hurts the most? I can't remember the last time you looked at me the way you just looked at your phone." The observation landed like a physical blow. Samuel opened his mouth to deny it, but no words came. Because she was right. Anticipation had flickered through him at the thought of Danica's message, a feeling long absent from his interactions with his wife. "I'm tired, Samuel," Ilara continued, her voice softening. "Tired of feeling like I'm the only one still invested in this marriage." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "Isn't it?" Ilara challenged. "When was the last time you asked about my research without checking your watch? When was the last time we had sex that didn't feel like an obligation? When was the last time you chose me over work?" Samuel remained silent, unable to provide the answers she deserved. His phone buzzed again, a second message from Danica, doubling his guilt. "I have my dissertation defense in 3 weeks, Ilara said into the silence. "After that, I need to make a decision about MIT. I'd like us to make it together, but I'm not sure that's possible anymore." "What does that mean?" Samuel asked, though part of him already knew. "It means I'm not sure what we're fighting to save," Ilara replied quietly. "Or if you even want to save it." The next morning, Samuel arrived at Fisher Tech headquarters earlier than usual, the conversation with Ilara still echoing in his mind. His assistant Melissa looked surprised to see him before 8 a.m., especially after a business trip. "You're in early, Mr. Fisher. Coffee?" "Double espresso," he muttered, heading toward his office. "And ask Brooke Daniels to see me when she gets in." Brooke, Fisher Tech's chief legal officer, appeared in his doorway an hour later. At 45, she'd been with the company since its founding, one of the few people Samuel trusted implicitly with sensitive matters. "You summoned me at an ungodly hour," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "This better be good." Samuel closed his office door before speaking. "I need to understand our options for a potential relocation of company headquarters." Brooke's eyebrows shot up. "Moving Fisher Tech? The company literally has Austin in its advertising materials." What's prompted this? Samuel hesitated. Exploring opportunities. Boston has a strong tech ecosystem. Boston, Brooke repeated, her shrewd eyes narrowing. This wouldn't have anything to do with Ilara's rumored job offer from MIT, would it? You've heard about that? Samuel asked, surprised. Academic circles talk. Tech circles listen. Brooke leaned forward. Samuel, moving a $2 billion company because your wife got a job offer is either the most romantic or most reckless thing I've ever heard. Which one is it? Samuel avoided her gaze. Just exploring options. Bullshit, Brooke said flatly. I've known you too long. What's really going on? Samuel considered confiding in her about Danica, about the pregnancy, about his crumbling marriage, but admitting his infidelity would make it real in a way he wasn't prepared to face. If Fisher Tech were to remain in Austin, he said instead, but my personal circumstances changed, what would the board's reaction be? Understanding dawned in Brooke's eyes. You're talking about divorce. Samuel nodded once, sharply. The company would survive, Brooke said carefully, but your ownership structure might be complicated depending on your prenup situation. We don't have one. Brooke winced. Then you've got problems. Texas is a community property state. Anything acquired during the marriage, including the explosive growth of Fisher Tech, would likely be divided equally. That can't happen, Samuel said firmly. I built this company. With Ilara's research as its foundation, Brooke reminded him. Don't think that wouldn't come up in any proceedings. Samuel drummed his fingers on his desk, mind racing. There must be options. Legal ones, limited. Brooke studied him with concern. Samuel, as your friend and not your lawyer, is this really the path you want to take? Ilara has been part of Fisher Tech's story from the beginning. Things change, Samuel said simply. They certainly do. Brooke stood, straightening her blazer. I'll have my team look into contingency options discreetly. But Samuel, think very carefully before you do anything irreversible. After Brooke left, Samuel finally checked the messages from Danica that had arrived the previous night. Had my first prenatal appointment today. Everything looks good. Doctor says I'm exactly 6 weeks along. The second message contained a blurry ultrasound image. Samuel stared at it, trying to connect the grainy black and white photo with the reality of a child, his child, growing inside Danica. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice his office door opening until a voice broke his concentration. Bad time. Samuel looked up to find Marcus Chen, his chief technology officer and oldest friend, watching him with curious eyes. Quickly tucking away his phone, Samuel forced a smile. Just distracted. What's up? Marcus closed the door behind him. Brooke just came from your office looking like she'd swallowed something unpleasant, and now you're staring at your phone like it contains nuclear launch codes. Want to tell me what's going on? Just some personal matters, Samuel deflected. Bullshit, Marcus replied, echoing Brooke's earlier skepticism. I've known you since Stanford. I was your best man. I know when you're spiraling. Samuel considered denying it further, but exhaustion overtook him. My life is imploding, Marcus. Ilara's considering a position at MIT. That's great for her career, Marcus observed. Less great for your marriage, I'm guessing? There's more. Samuel lowered his voice despite the closed door. I've been seeing someone in San Francisco. For about 1.5 years now. Marcus's expression shifted from concern to disappointment. Christ, Samuel. She's pregnant. The office fell silent, Marcus staring at his friend with undisguised shock. Please tell me you're not serious. 6 weeks along, Samuel confirmed. Marcus collapsed into the chair Brooke had vacated. You've lost your mind. You do realize that, right? You're throwing away your marriage, risking half your company, and potentially destroying your reputation in one spectacular mess. I didn't plan this, Samuel protested. Really? 18 months of cheating sounds pretty damn planned to me, Marcus countered. What are you going to do? Samuel spread his hands helplessly. I don't know. Ilara and we've grown apart. She's focused on her academic career. I've built this company into something significant. We want different things now. And this other woman, she wants what you want? Danica's different. She's younger, less challenging, more impressed by your success? Marcus suggested coldly. Samuel bristled. You don't know her. I know you, Marcus replied. And I've watched you self-destruct before when things got too real with Rachel in college, with Jen before Ilara. You run when relationships require actual work. The assessment stung precisely because it contained elements of truth. Samuel had indeed left previous relationships when they became too demanding, too complicated. "This is different," he insisted. "There's a child involved now." Marcus sighed deeply. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. Don't make decisions when you're emotional. And for God's sake, talk to Ilara before you do anything drastic." After Marcus left, Samuel sat alone in his office, staring out at the Austin skyline that had been the backdrop to his success. The city had embraced him, celebrated him as one of its tech visionaries. Would that change if his personal life imploded publicly? His phone rang. "Danica, I can't talk now," he answered quietly. "I just needed to hear your voice," she replied. "I'm feeling overwhelmed. This is all happening so fast." Samuel closed his eyes, trying to imagine a future where he split his life between a child in San Francisco and a company in Austin, with the wreckage of his marriage somewhere in between. "I need to tell Ilara," he said suddenly. "After her dissertation defense, she deserves to finish that chapter without distraction." "And then what?" Danica asked, her voice small. "And then we figure it out," Samuel promised. "Together." As he ended the call, a new email notification appeared on his screen. From Dr. Nathan Whitman at MIT, copied to Ilara. The subject line read, "Formal offer, research fellowship position." The walls of Samuel's carefully constructed life were crumbling faster than he could shore them up. Something would have to give, and soon. The University of Texas auditorium buzzed with anticipation as academics and students gathered for Ilara's doctoral dissertation defense. Samuel sat in the third row, absently checking his watch, a habit that had once irritated his wife, but now barely registered in their deteriorating relationship. 3 weeks had passed since their confrontation about MIT, weeks filled with strained politeness and separate sleeping arrangements. "Quite the turnout for your wife." Samuel turned to find Dean Patterson settling into the seat beside him, beaming with the pride of a mentor. "Ilara's work has generated significant interest," Patterson continued, oblivious to Samuel's discomfort. "The neural network adaptation models she's developed could revolutionize predictive analytics across multiple industries." "So I've heard," Samuel replied, the words carrying more bitterness than intended. Those same models had been offered to Fisher Tech years ago, but Samuel had dismissed them as too theoretical, too untested for commercial application. Now 3 competing companies were implementing similar systems based on published portions of Ilara's research. "MIT is getting quite the acquisition," Patterson added, his eyes twinkling, "though I imagine that creates complications for you two." Before Samuel could respond, the auditorium lights dimmed. Ilara appeared on stage, her posture straight and confident despite the pressure of the moment. She wore a tailored navy suit that Samuel had never seen before, another small reminder of how separate their lives had become. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady. "My dissertation examines adaptive neural networks for predictive modeling in complex dynamic systems with limited data sets." As she spoke, Samuel found himself truly listening to her research for perhaps the first time. The elegant solutions she proposed, the breakthrough approaches to machine learning limitations, it all suddenly crystallized why MIT had pursued her so aggressively. His wife wasn't just brilliant, she was pioneering entirely new approaches that would likely become industry standard within years. His phone vibrated silently in his pocket. Danica again. 7 weeks pregnant now, she'd become increasingly anxious about their future. Samuel ignored the notification, focusing instead on Ilara's presentation. He owed her this much attention at least. Midway through her defense, Samuel noticed Nathan Whitman in the front row, nodding appreciatively at key points. The MIT professor had extended his Austin stay specifically for this event, a fact that twisted uncomfortably in Samuel's gut. Was it purely professional interest, or something more? The question arose unbidden, surprising him with its intensity. When the presentation concluded, the panel began their questioning. Ilara fielded each inquiry with confident precision, occasionally glancing toward the audience, never quite meeting Samuel's eyes, but ensuring he was still present. An hour later, it was over. The committee unanimously approved her dissertation with exceptional commendation. The audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet. Samuel stood with them, a strange mixture of pride and regret washing over him. As the crowd began to disperse, Samuel made his way toward the stage where Ilara was surrounded by well-wishers. He hung back, waiting for the circle to thin before approaching. "That was remarkable," he said, when they were finally face to face. "Truly groundbreaking work." Surprise flickered across Ilara's features, perhaps at his presence, perhaps at the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I wouldn't miss it," Samuel replied, the words feeling hollow against the backdrop of his recent absences from her life. "There's a reception in the department lounge," she said, gathering her presentation materials. "Faculty and some industry representatives. You're welcome to join, though I know you have a company to run." The gentle barb wasn't lost on him. "I cleared my schedule for the afternoon." Something softened in Ilara's expression. "That's thoughtful of you." As they walked toward the exit, Whitman intercepted them. "Dr. Simmons Fisher," he said warmly, emphasizing her newly earned title. "Exceptional presentation. You've validated our department's enthusiasm for having you join us." "Thank you, Nathan," Ilara replied, her smile genuine. "I'm looking forward to it." The casual exchange confirmed what Samuel had suspected. Ilara had already decided to accept the MIT position. The realization should have angered him, but instead brought only a weary resignation. They were both moving on, just in different directions. His phone vibrated again. With an apologetic glance toward Ilara, he checked the screen. "Emergency at the office. Marcus needs you to call immediately." The message was from Melissa, his assistant. Samuel frowned. True emergencies at Fisher Tech were rare. "Problem?" Ilara asked, noting his expression. "Possibly. I need to make a call." He stepped away, finding a quiet corner of the hallway. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" "At Ilara's dissertation defense." "What's happening?" "You need to get back to the office. Now." Marcus's voice was tight with tension. "The board called an emergency meeting. Arthur Riviera is leading it." Samuel's stomach dropped. Riviera, his most vocal critic on the board, had been pushing for more conservative growth strategies for months. "What's the pretext?" "It's not a pretext, Samuel. Someone leaked financial documentation suggesting you've been transferring company resources to personal accounts. Riviera is calling for a vote of no confidence." "That's absurd," Samuel hissed. "I've done nothing improper." "I know that," Marcus replied. "But the documentation looks convincing. Very convincing. You need to address this immediately before it spirals." Samuel ended the call, mind racing. Who would have access to financial records detailed enough to create convincing forgeries? And why now on the day of Ilara's defense? He returned to find Ilara still chatting with Whitman, their conversation animated. "I'm sorry," he interrupted. "There's an emergency at Fisher Tech. I need to go." Disappointment flashed across Ilara's face, quickly masked. "Of course. Will you be home for dinner?" "I don't know," Samuel answered honestly. "This could take hours to resolve." "Your company needs you," she said with practiced understanding. "Go." As Samuel hurried toward the parking lot, he couldn't shake the feeling that his marriage had just reached another invisible but significant breaking point. The Fisher Tech boardroom crackled with tension when Samuel arrived 30 minutes later. 8 board members sat around the polished table, with Arthur Riviera positioned directly opposite Samuel's usual seat. At 72, Riviera was old-school tech, having made his fortune during the first internet boom. He'd been an early investor in Fisher Tech, but had grown increasingly critical of Samuel's aggressive expansion strategies. "Thank you for joining us, Mr. Fisher," Riviera said, his tone making it clear the gratitude was insincere. "We were just reviewing some concerning documentation." "Documentation, I've been informed, is fraudulent," Samuel replied, remaining standing. "I'd like to see what you're accusing me of." Brooke slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of what appeared to be wire transfers from Fisher Tech's development fund to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The transactions, dating back 18 months, totaled nearly $4.2 million. "These are forgeries," Samuel stated flatly. "I've authorized no such transfers." "The account is registered to a shell company called Horizon Ventures," Riviera continued, as if Samuel hadn't spoken. "Our financial team traced Horizon back to personal holdings we believe are connected to you." "That's impossible," Samuel insisted, though a cold dread was spreading through him. "I have no connection to any Horizon Ventures." "Perhaps your legal counsel would like to comment." Riviera shifted his gaze to Brooke. All eyes turned to her. Brooke cleared her throat. "These documents were brought to my attention approximately 3 hours ago. I haven't had sufficient time to verify their authenticity or investigate the shell company structure. Convenient, Riviera remarked. The board feels differently. We've seen enough to justify immediate action pending a full investigation. What action? Samuel demanded. Temporary removal as CEO, Riviera answered. Effective immediately. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some supporting Riviera, others objecting to the hasty decision. Samuel stood silent, shock giving way to cold fury. This is a coordinated attack, he finally said, voice cutting through the chaos. Someone has manufactured evidence to force me out. I demand time to defend myself properly. You'll have that opportunity during the investigation, Riviera assured him. But the board has concerns about evidence tampering if you remain in position. You can't do this, Samuel insisted. I founded this company. I built it from nothing. And we're protecting it, Riviera countered. The vote has already been taken, 6-2 in favor of temporary removal. Samuel turned to Marcus, who avoided his gaze. Did you vote for this? I abstained, Marcus replied quietly. The evidence is concerning, Samuel. We need to investigate properly. Betrayal burned like acid in Samuel's chest. Who brought these allegations forward? I have the right to face my accuser. Riviera exchanged glances with several board members before responding. The documentation was delivered anonymously to multiple board members simultaneously. Very thorough, very damning. This is a setup, Samuel insisted. Someone wants me out. Perhaps, Riviera conceded, or perhaps you've been embezzling from your own company. Either way, you're suspended until we determine the truth. Security will escort you from the building, and your access credentials have been temporarily revoked. Samuel looked around the table at faces he'd known for years, some apologetic, others carefully neutral, a few openly hostile. 5 years of leadership, of driving the company from a startup to a major player in the tech sector, and they'd removed him on the basis of anonymous accusations. This isn't over, he promised, gathering his personal items from the desk. When I clear my name, I'll remember who stood where today. Samuel drove aimlessly through Austin's streets, mind racing between rage and panic. Who would have both motive and capability to forge such convincing financial records? The timing was too perfect to be coincidence, the very day of Ilara's greatest academic achievement, when their marriage hung by a thread. His phone buzzed with a call from Danica. He answered, desperate for any friendly voice. Samuel, are you okay? You sound strange. I've been suspended from Fisher Tech, he said, the words foreign on his tongue. Someone accused me of embezzlement, forged documents. The board voted me out temporarily. Oh my God, Danica breathed. That's insane. Who would do that? I don't know, Samuel replied, pulling into the parking lot of a riverside park. But it feels coordinated. I'm being set up. What can I do? Should I come to Austin? The offer caught Samuel off guard. Until now, their relationship had existed exclusively during his San Francisco trips. The idea of Danica in Austin, in his actual life, felt suddenly complicated. No, he said quickly. Not yet. Let me figure this out first. A notification lit up his phone. An email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, Horizon Ventures Truth. His heart hammering, Samuel opened it while still on the call with Danica. Samuel? Are you still there? I just received an anonymous email, he said distractedly. Hold on. The message contained a single line of text. Check the registration documents for Horizon Ventures, specifically the notary date and witness signatures. Someone's trying to help me, Samuel murmured. Or it's another trap. What are you going to do? Danica asked. I need to see those original documents. If they're forgeries, there might be inconsistencies. He paused, a thought occurring to him. I need to call Brooke. After ending the call with Danica, Samuel immediately contacted Brooke, who answered cautiously. I shouldn't be talking to you during an active investigation, Samuel. Did anyone examine the notary information on the Horizon Ventures registration? He asked, ignoring her warning. A pause. Not thoroughly. Why? I received an anonymous tip suggesting the answer might be there. Can you check without alerting Riviera? Samuel, I'm walking a very fine ethical line here, Brooke warned, but I'll look. Give me an hour. While waiting, Samuel drove to a nearby coffee shop, seeking normalcy in the familiar environment. He ordered an espresso and found a quiet corner table, trying to piece together who might benefit from his removal from Fisher Tech. His phone rang again. Ilara this time. Guilt and anxiety twisted in his stomach as he answered. Are you coming to the reception? She asked without preamble. Samuel closed his eyes. In the chaos, he'd completely forgotten about her dissertation celebration. "I can't. There's been a situation at Fisher Tech. I've been temporarily suspended." "Suspended?" Ilara's voice sharpened with concern. "On what grounds?" "Fraudulent accusations of financial impropriety," he replied, surprised by her immediate shift to protectiveness despite their recent distance. "Someone set me up." "That's absurd," Ilara said firmly. "You've made plenty of questionable decisions, but you're not dishonest about money." The vote of confidence, however backhanded, was unexpected. "Thank you for that. Where are you now?" she asked. "Cafe on Riverside, trying to figure out my next move." "I'll meet you there after the reception," Ilara stated, not asking. "This is about our marriage, Samuel. My husband needs support, whether or not we're in a good place." The call ended before he could respond, leaving him staring at his phone in surprise. Despite everything, his emotional withdrawal, the unspoken distance between them, his unexplained absences, Ilara was still prepared to stand by him in crisis. The realization brought a wave of shame crashing over him. What kind of man betrayed that level of loyalty? His phone buzzed with a text from Brooke. "Found something. Meet me at Zilker Park in 20 minutes. South entrance. Come alone." Brooke was waiting on a bench overlooking Barton Springs, her professional attire incongruous against the backdrop of joggers and dog walkers. "This better be good," Samuel said, sitting beside her. "My entire career is imploding." "It's better than good," Brooke replied, opening her tablet. "It's definitive proof of forgery." She pulled up the Horizon Ventures registration documents. "Look at the notary date, March 18th, 2023. And the notary seal belongs to Patricia Winters of San Francisco County." "What am I missing?" Samuel asked impatiently. "Patricia Winters died on February 2nd, 2023, Brooke said triumphantly, more than a month before supposedly notarizing these documents. Whoever created these forgeries was thorough about the financial details, but sloppy with the authentication. Relief washed over Samuel. "So I'm cleared." "Not entirely," Brooke cautioned. "This proves the documents are fraudulent, but not who created them or why. Riviera is already suggesting you might have forged them yourself as some kind of elaborate distraction." "That's insane," Samuel protested. "Why would I damage my own company?" "Because the forgeries only came to light after we began confidential discussions about your potential divorce," Brooke said quietly. "Some board members think you're creating financial chaos to complicate any division of assets." The implication stunned Samuel. "You think I manufactured this entire crisis to cheat Ilara in a divorce?" "I don't," Brooke assured him, "but others might. The timing is suspicious, Samuel. Very few people knew you were considering divorce. The list of people with both that knowledge and access to detailed financial records is extremely short." The realization hit him like a physical blow. "You think someone from inside Fisher Tech is behind this?" "I think whoever did this is very well informed about both your personal and professional vulnerabilities," Brooke agreed, "and timed this attack perfectly to maximize damage." Samuel's mind raced through possibilities. Riviera himself, perhaps, or another executive who coveted his position. But who would have known about his marital problems and potential divorce plans? A new text message arrived from an unknown number. Check the witness signature on page 3 of the Horizon documents. Compare handwriting to known samples. Samuel showed Brooke the message. Another anonymous tip. Who's sending these? Brooke quickly found the signature page. The witness is listed as Marcus Chen. "That's impossible," Samuel said immediately. "Marcus wouldn't sign fraudulent documents." "Not willingly," Brooke agreed, enlarging the signature. "But this doesn't look like his handwriting. It's close, but the Y and H are formed differently." Samuel stared at the signature, then at the mysterious text message. "Someone wants me to catch the forger. Someone with inside knowledge of both the documents and the fraud. But who?" Brooke wondered. Before Samuel could respond, another text arrived from the same unknown number. Fisher Tech security footage, server room access, April 12th, 2:17 a.m. "April 12th, Samuel murmured. "That's when we upgraded the financial servers. Very few people had access that night." "I'll check the footage," Brooke promised. "Discreetly." Samuel's phone rang, Ilara again. "I need to take this," he told Brooke. "She's meeting me after her reception." Brooke's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're telling Ilara about all this, including the divorce considerations?" "She deserves to know what's happening," Samuel replied, though in truth he hadn't decided how much to reveal. "She's still my wife." After Brooke left, Samuel answered Ilara's call. "I'm at Zilker Park. Where are you?" "Just leaving campus now," she replied. "But Samuel, something strange just happened. Nathan Whitman pulled me aside at the reception with an unusual question." "What question?" Samuel asked, suddenly alert. "He asked if we'd had financial troubles recently. Said he'd heard rumors about Fisher Tech having accounting irregularities. It was oddly specific, Samuel, and completely unprompted." Samuel's blood ran cold. "Did he mention anything about Horizon Ventures?" "No," Ilara said slowly. "Should he have?" "I don't know," Samuel admitted, "but his timing is suspicious." "Samuel," Ilara's voice lowered, "is there something you're not telling me? Something beyond a temporary suspension?" Before he could answer, a third text arrived from the mysterious number. "Whitman connected to Riviera through Sequoia Capital Investments. Check 2022 funding round participants." Samuel stared at the message, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "Ilara, I think Whitman might be involved in what's happening at Fisher Tech. Has he been unusually interested in our finances or the company's structure?" "Not specifically," Ilara replied cautiously, "but he's been very persistent about my accepting the MIT position, unusually so for an academic recruitment." "When did he first contact you?" "About 7 months ago," Ilara said, out of the blue. "Said he'd read my published research and wanted to discuss opportunities." 7 months ago, around the time Riviera had begun challenging Samuel's leadership more aggressively. The timing couldn't be coincidental. "Ilara, I need you to do something for me," Samuel said urgently. "Don't go anywhere with Whitman alone, don't discuss Fisher Tech with him, and meet me at home instead of the cafe. I think we're being played against each other." "Samuel, you're scaring me," Ilara replied. "What's really going on?" "I'm not entirely sure," he admitted, "but I think someone has been orchestrating both your job offer and my removal from Fisher Tech, and I'm starting to suspect why." As Samuel ended the call, a final message appeared from the anonymous number, one that turned his blood to ice. "Look into Danica Winter's family connections, specifically her father, Michael Winters, former CFO of Riviera Technologies until 2020, currently director at Sequoia Capital. The pregnancy is not accidental." Samuel's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel, his Audi speeding toward the hillside mansion he shared with Ilara. The revelation about Danica's family connections had shattered his already fragile reality. Could his affair, his unborn child, be part of an elaborate corporate takedown? The possibility was too grotesque to fully process. Traffic crawled along Mopac Expressway as his phone rang again. Danica. He let it go to voicemail, unable to trust his own judgment about her intentions now. If the anonymous texter was right, nothing in their relationship had been genuine, not her attraction, not her supposed accidental pregnancy, not her professed love. When he finally pulled into his driveway, Samuel spotted Ilara's Tesla already parked near the entrance. He sat in his car for several minutes, gathering courage to face her with some semblance of the truth. How much should he reveal? The corporate conspiracy was clear, but confessing his affair with Danica would devastate Ilara on what should have been her day of triumph. The front door opened before he reached it. Ilara stood in the entryway, changed from her formal dissertation attire into jeans and a simple blouse. The casual outfit reminded him of their early days together, before success and ambition had driven them to opposite ends of their shared life. "You look terrible," she said without preamble. "It's been a day," Samuel replied, stepping past her into the house. "Tell me what's happening," Ilara demanded, following him into the kitchen where he immediately reached for the bourbon. Samuel poured himself a generous measure before turning to face her. "It's complicated and not entirely clear yet, but I have reason to believe that Arthur Riviera has orchestrated my removal from Fisher Tech by manufacturing evidence of financial fraud." Ilara leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Why would he do that? Riviera has opposed my growth strategy for years. He wants the company to focus on existing products rather than expanding into new markets." Samuel took a long swallow of bourbon. "But there's more. I think your MIT job offer might be connected." Ilara's eyebrows shot up. "That's absurd. Nathan Whitman is a respected academic. Who has financial ties to Riviera through Sequoia Capital?" Samuel countered. "The timing is too perfect, Ilara. You get recruited away from Austin just as I'm being forced out of my company. It's coordinated." "To what end?" Ilara asked, her analytical mind clearly working through the possibilities. "Even if you're right, What does Riviera gain by separating us geographically? Samuel hesitated, the full truth hovering on his lips. I think they're trying to destroy more than just my career, he said carefully. They're targeting our marriage. Ilara's laugh was sharp, humorless. Our marriage was in trouble long before Whitman or Riviera entered the picture, Samuel. Let's not pretend otherwise. The accuracy of her assessment stung. Nevertheless, I believe they've been exploiting our difficulties. How would they even know about our personal problems? Ilara pressed. Samuel set down his glass, suddenly unable to maintain the half-truths. Because I've been discussing the possibility of divorce with Brooke, confidentially, and somehow that information leaked. The color drained from Ilara's face. You've been planning to divorce me? For how long? Not planning, Samuel backpedaled, realizing his mistake. Discussing options, hypothetically. When? Ilara demanded, her voice dangerously quiet. 3 weeks ago, after you mentioned the MIT offer. Ilara stared at him, hurt, transforming rapidly to anger. So your immediate response to my career opportunity was to call your lawyer about divorcing me. And now that you're in trouble, you're suggesting some elaborate conspiracy involving my academic achievement. That's not what Thousands of academics apply for positions at MIT every year. Ilara cut him off. The idea that my offer is part of some plot against you is not just paranoid, it's insulting. Not everything in this world revolves around Samuel Fisher and his precious company. You don't understand, Samuel insisted. I have evidence that Whitman is connected to Riviera, who's now acting CEO of Fisher Tech, and there's more. He hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about Danica. More what? Ilara challenged. More delusions of persecution? More secret plans you've been making behind my back? What else have you been hiding, Samuel? The question hung in the air between them, demanding truth Samuel wasn't prepared to provide. Before he could formulate a response, his phone buzzed with another message from the anonymous number. Check your home office immediately. Not secure. What is it? Ilara asked, noting his expression. I don't know, Samuel admitted, showing her the text. But I've been receiving these messages all day. They've been accurate so far. Together, they moved towards Samuel's home office, a space he rarely used since most of his work happened at Fisher Tech headquarters. The room was exactly as he remembered leaving it. Leather chair pushed neatly under the desk, papers organized in tidy stacks, laptop closed on the blotter. I don't see anything unusual, Ilara observed. Samuel scanned the room carefully, trying to identify what might have prompted the warning. His eyes landed on the laptop, a personal device he used primarily for home finances and entertainment, not Fisher Tech business. My laptop shouldn't be here, he realized suddenly. I took it to San Francisco last trip and never brought it back. I've been using my company laptop exclusively. Ilara frowned. Are you sure? It looks like your personal MacBook. Positive, Samuel insisted, approaching the desk cautiously. I remember being annoyed that I'd left it at the hotel. Had to use my phone for the flight entertainment. With growing suspicion, Samuel opened the laptop. It powered on immediately, revealing his desktop wallpaper, a photo of him and Ilara from their honeymoon in Greece. Everything looked normal. Someone's been in our house, he said quietly, and they want me to find something on this computer. Ilara's skepticism was evident. Or you simply forgot you brought it home. Samuel shook his head, opening the file browser. I know I didn't. He navigated to the recently accessed files, finding a folder he didn't recognize labeled HV Documentation. What's HV? Ilara asked, moving behind him to see the screen. Horizon Ventures, Samuel murmured. The shell company I supposedly created to embezzle funds. Opening the folder revealed dozens of files, bank statements, transfer authorizations, corporate registration forms, all bearing Samuel's signature or authorization codes. To anyone examining them, they would appear to be definitive proof of his guilt. These are forgeries, he said, scrolling through the damning evidence. Very sophisticated ones. But why would someone plant them on your personal laptop? Ilara asked, her earlier anger giving way to confusion. To ensure I'd be convicted if this went to court, Samuel realized. Corporate financial fraud carries prison time. They're not just pushing me out of Fisher Tech, they're trying to destroy me completely. Ilara sat heavily in a nearby chair. This is insane, Samuel. Who would go to such lengths? Someone with resources, technical expertise, and a deep grudge, Samuel replied, still examining the files. The question is why now? What triggered this attack at this particular moment? His phone rang. Brooke. "I found the security footage," she said without greeting when he answered. "You were right. Someone accessed the financial servers on April 12th, and you're not going to believe who it was." "Who?" Samuel demanded. "Nathan Whitman," Brooke replied. "He was escorted in by Marcus Chen at 2:17 a.m. exactly. They spent 45 minutes in the server room together." Samuel's blood ran cold. "Marcus is involved?" "It appears so," Brooke confirmed. "There's more. I did some digging on Whitman's background. Before academia, he worked for a cybersecurity firm contracted by Riviera Technologies. The same firm handled Fisher Tech's security audit last year, which gave them access to our entire network architecture. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. They've been planning this for over a year, Samuel realized. Riviera, Whitman, and apparently Marcus. But why betray me? Marcus has been my friend since college. "I don't know," Brooke admitted, "but you should check your email. The board just received anonymous evidence vindicating you, showing the Horizon Ventures documents were forgeries created on Fisher Tech servers. They're calling another emergency meeting tomorrow morning." "Anonymous evidence?" Samuel repeated. "The same person who's been texting me tips all day?" "Possibly," Brooke said. "Whoever it is, they seem determined to expose the conspiracy against you. But be careful, Samuel. This feels like we're being manipulated in multiple directions." After ending the call, Samuel turned to Ilara, who had been listening intently to his side of the conversation. "It seems you were right about Whitman," she conceded. "But that doesn't explain why Marcus would betray you, or who's sending these anonymous tips." Samuel closed the laptop, mind racing. "We need to leave. If they planted evidence in our house, it's not safe here." "Where would we go?" Ilara asked pragmatically. "Hotel downtown," Samuel decided. "Under your name, not mine. They might be monitoring my credit cards." As they prepared to leave, Samuel received another text from the anonymous number. "Not just your home. Your phone is compromised. Fisher Tech Security tracking your movements. Leave devices. Take only cash. Brooke compromised too." "Now they're saying Brooke is involved?" Ilara read over his shoulder, skepticism returning. "Samuel, this is getting ridiculous. How do you know these texts aren't part of the manipulation?" "I don't," he admitted, "but every tip so far is checked out. And if they wanted to hurt me, why expose the forgeries to the board?" Ilara studied him, her analytical mind clearly weighing possibilities. "If we leave our phones, how do we communicate? How do we get more information?" "Burner phones," Samuel suggested. "Paid for with cash. Old school." To his surprise, Ilara nodded. "There's a convenience store on South Congress that sells prepaid phones. We can stop there first." 20 minutes later, they left their house with minimal belongings, phones powered off and removed from their vehicles. Samuel drove them in Ilara's Tesla, reasoning it would attract less attention than his distinctive Audi. At the convenience store, Samuel purchased 2 basic prepaid phones, while Ilara waited in the car. As he was paying, his eye caught a local newspaper headline, "Fisher Tech stock plummets amid leadership crisis." "Great," he muttered, adding the newspaper to his purchase. Back in the car, he handed Ilara one of the phones. Untraceable, at least temporarily. She accepted it with a wry smile. "I never imagined my dissertation day would end with burner phones and conspiracy theories." "I'm sorry," Samuel said, meaning it. "Today should have been about celebrating your achievement." "Is this really happening?" Ilara asked suddenly, vulnerability breaking through her composed exterior. "Or have you manufactured this crisis to distract from something else?" The question hit dangerously close to his hidden truth about Danica. "Why would I do that?" "I don't know, Samuel," Ilara replied, studying his face. "But you've been distant for months. You've apparently been discussing divorce options, and now suddenly we need to band together against some shadowy corporate conspiracy? It's convenient timing." Her insight was uncomfortably accurate. While the conspiracy against him appeared real, part of him had seized on it as a way to avoid confessing his affair with Danica, a confession that seemed increasingly necessary given her apparent connection to Riviera. "There's something I haven't told you," Samuel began reluctantly. Ilara's phone, her regular smartphone, rang before he could continue. She glanced at it, then at Samuel. "It's Whitman," she said. "Should I answer?" Samuel hesitated, then nodded. "Put it on speaker. Let's hear what he has to say," Ilara answered, activating the speakerphone. "Hello, Nathan." "Ilara," Whitman's voice sounded strained. "I've been trying to reach you. There's been a concerning development regarding the MIT position." "What kind of development?" Ilara asked neutrally. "The funding for the fellowship has been questioned," Whitman explained carefully. "Apparently, some board members have raised concerns about my recruitment methods." "What does that mean?" Ilara pressed. "It means we need to accelerate our timeline," Whitman replied. "If you could come to my hotel room at the Four Seasons, I have paperwork that needs immediate attention to secure your position." Samuel and Ilara exchanged glances. The invitation was transparently suspicious. "I can't tonight, Nathan," Ilara replied smoothly. "It's been a long day. Perhaps tomorrow morning." "This is time-sensitive, Ilara," Whitman insisted, an edge entering his voice. "The department chair is waiting for my call. Your career trajectory depends on moving quickly here." "My career trajectory is secure regardless of MIT's offer," Ilara countered. "I'll review any paperwork tomorrow, not before." A telling silence followed before Whitman responded. "As you wish. But don't be surprised if the opportunity has vanished by morning. Others are eager for this position." After ending the call, Ilara turned to Samuel. "He's attempting to isolate me from you." "Agreed," Samuel said, starting the car. "But why? What does he gain from getting you alone in his hotel room?" "I don't know," Ilara admitted. "But I'm increasingly convinced you're right about him being involved in whatever's happening at Fisher Tech." They drove in silence for several minutes, each processing the escalating strangeness of their situation. Finally, Samuel pulled into the parking garage of the W Hotel in downtown Austin. "We'll check in under your name," he instructed. "I'll wait in the car. If anyone's monitoring, we don't want them to see us together." Ilara nodded, taking the cash he offered. "And then what? We hide in a hotel room while your company implodes?" "Then we start investigating," Samuel replied. "Beginning with Marcus. If he betrayed me, I need to understand why." 15 minutes later, they were settled in a suite on the 12th floor. Samuel immediately began jotting notes on hotel stationery, mapping out connections between Riviera, Whitman, and potentially Marcus and Brooke. "You were about to tell me something," Ilara reminded him, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Before Whitman called, something you hadn't told me." Samuel paused, pen hovering over paper. The moment of truth had arrived, and he could no longer avoid it. "I've been having an affair," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes, "for about 18 months. With a woman in San Francisco." He expected anger, tears, perhaps even for Ilara to walk out. Instead, she responded with an eerie calm. "I know." Samuel's head snapped up. "You know?" "I've known for about a year," Ilara confirmed, her expression unreadable. "The receipts for jewelry I never received, the late-night calls you took in another room, the San Francisco trips that kept getting extended. I'm not stupid, Samuel." "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked, genuinely baffled. "At first I thought it was just sex," Ilara explained, her voice controlled but brittle. "A midlife crisis thing that would burn itself out. I focused on my research, on building my own future. Then I realized it was more than that. You were emotionally invested in her." The accuracy of her assessment was jarring. "How could you tell?" "Because that's how you used to look when you talked about me," Ilara replied simply. "Before I became an inconvenience to your success." The raw truth of her words stripped away Samuel's remaining defenses. "I'm sorry," he said inadequately. "Is she the reason you were discussing divorce options?" Samuel nodded slowly. "She's pregnant. 7 weeks." Ilara absorbed this with visible effort, closing her eyes briefly. "And now you think she might be connected to Riviera's attack on you?" "I received a text suggesting her father is Michael Winters, former CFO of Riviera Technologies and current director at Sequoia Capital," Samuel explained. "If that's true, the pregnancy might not be accidental." A humorless laugh escaped Ilara. "So you're the victim of not just corporate espionage, but reproductive entrapment? That's convenient." "I know how it sounds," Samuel acknowledged. "But given everything else we've discovered, it's not implausible." "What's her name?" Ilara asked. "Danica," Samuel answered. "Danica Winters." Ilara reached for her burner phone, startling Samuel. "What are you doing?" "Investigating," she replied crisply. "If I can get internet access, I can verify whether Michael Winters has a daughter named Danica." Samuel watched in silence as Ilara efficiently navigated to the hotel's Wi-Fi and began her search. Despite everything, his betrayal, the pregnancy, the corporate conspiracy, Her analytical mind remained focused on gathering facts. It was the quality that had first attracted him to her, this ability to compartmentalize emotion in pursuit of truth. "Found her," Ilara announced after several minutes. Danica Winters, 28, graduate of UCLA, marketing consultant, and yes, daughter of Michael Winters, according to several Society page photos from San Francisco Chronicle archives. She turned the screen towards Samuel, showing a photo of a younger Danica at a charity gala, standing beside a distinguished older man. "That's definitely her," Samuel confirmed, his stomach sinking. "Congratulations," Ilara said acidly. "You've been sleeping with the enemy's daughter for a year and a half, and now she's carrying your child, conveniently timed to coincide with Riviera's takeover of your company and my recruitment to MIT. The full implications crashed over Samuel with devastating force. Every intimate moment with Danica, every shared secret, every whispered plan for their future, all potentially engineered as part of Riviera's long-game strategy to destroy him. "I need to talk to her," he said, reaching for his burner phone. "And say what?" Ilara challenged. "Accuse the mother of your child of corporate espionage? What if you're wrong? What if I'm right?" Samuel countered. "What if our child is just a pawn in Riviera's game?" Ilara's expression softened slightly at the genuine anguish in his voice. "First, we need more information. Before you confront anyone, Danica, Marcus, Brooke, we need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with." "The board meeting is tomorrow morning," Samuel reminded her. "According to Brooke, someone has sent evidence vindicating me. If I can be reinstated as CEO, I'll have the resources to investigate properly." "Unless it's another trap," Ilara pointed out. "What if they want you back at Fisher Tech for a reason? What if the vindication is just the next step in their plan?" The possibility hadn't occurred to Samuel. "Then what do? We do what academics do when faced with contradictory evidence," Ilara replied, determination replacing hurt in her expression. "We formulate hypotheses and test them systematically, starting with who's sending those anonymous texts." For the first time that day, Samuel felt something like hope. Despite his betrayal, despite the unraveling of their marriage, Ilara was still the most formidable ally he could ask for in a crisis. "I don't deserve your help," he admitted. "This isn't about what you deserve," Ilara responded evenly. "This is about uncovering the truth, and regardless of what happens between us personally, I want to know who thought they could use me as a pawn in their game against you." As she turned back to her research, Samuel's burner phone vibrated with a new message. Not from the anonymous number this time, but from a local Austin area code he didn't recognize. "Mr. Fisher, we've never met, but I believe I can help you understand what's happening. I work in IT security at Fisher Tech. I'm the one who's been sending you information. Please meet me at Mozart's Coffee at 11 p.m. tonight. Come alone. I have digital evidence of the entire conspiracy, including Ms. Winter's role." Jay-Z Mozart's Coffee, perched on the shores of Lake Austin, was nearly empty at 10:45 p.m. A few college students hunched over laptops, the soft glow of screens illuminating tired faces as they wrestled with end-of-semester assignments. Samuel chose a table on the outdoor deck, positioning himself with a clear view of both entrances. Despite Ilara's objections, he had insisted on coming alone as requested. "It could be a trap," she had argued in their hotel room. "If Riviera's people know you're gathering evidence, they might want to eliminate you directly." "In a public coffee shop," Samuel had countered, though her concern had planted seeds of doubt. Now, nursing a black coffee he didn't want, Samuel scanned each new arrival for anyone who might be his mysterious informant. The initials Jay-Z meant nothing to him. Fisher Tech employed over 300 people, and he couldn't possibly know everyone in IT security. At exactly 11 p.m., a young woman entered the cafe. Mid-20s with close-cropped dark hair and rectangular glasses, she ordered quickly at the counter before surveying the seating area. When her eyes met Samuel's, a flash of recognition passed between them. She approached his table with cautious steps. "Mr. Fisher?" Samuel nodded, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Jay-Z, I presume." "Jamie Zhang," she confirmed, settling into the seat and placing her laptop bag between her feet. "I'm a cybersecurity analyst at Fisher Tech. Level 2 clearance, 3 years with the company." "You've been sending me information all day," Samuel said. "Why?" Jamie glanced around nervously before leaning forward. "Because what they're doing is wrong. And because they tried to recruit me to help them. They? Riviera, Whitman, and your friend Marcus Chen. Jamie's expression hardened. They approached me 6 months ago, said they needed someone with server access for a special project. When I realized what they wanted, to plant false financial records, I pretended to go along while documenting everything. Why would you risk your career to help me? Samuel asked, suspicious of convenient allies after the day's revelations. Because my mother lost everything in a similar corporate takeover, Jamie replied simply. The CEO was framed, the company sold for parts, and hundreds of people lost their jobs, including her. We lost our house. I was 14. She met his gaze directly. I swore I'd never be complicit in something like that. Her sincerity seemed genuine, but Samuel remained cautious. You mentioned having digital evidence. Jamie nodded, retrieving a small USB drive from her pocket. Everything's here. Server logs showing when the false Horizon Ventures documents were created, email exchanges between Riviera and Whitman dating back 18 months, a recording of Marcus discussing the plan with them in the executive conference room after hours. She placed the drive on the table between them, and communications with Danica Winters detailing her role in the operation. Samuel stared at the tiny device, afraid to touch it. How did you get all this? I'm in cybersecurity, Jamie reminded him with a hint of professional pride. And they weren't nearly as careful as they thought. Riviera especially. He still writes his passwords on sticky notes under his keyboard. Despite everything, Samuel smiled briefly at the mundane vulnerability of his corporate adversary. And Danica, what exactly was her role? Jamie's expression turned sympathetic. She was brought in approximately 19 months ago. Her assignment was to... She stopped abruptly, eyes focusing on something beyond Samuel's shoulder. We've been made. Security team, approaching from the parking lot. Samuel turned to see two men in dark clothing moving purposefully toward the cafe entrance. Neither wore Fisher Tech identification, but their intent was unmistakable. Back exit, Jamie said tersely, gathering her belongings. Through the kitchen, now. They moved quickly, Samuel following Jamie's lead as she slipped through a service door marked Employees Only. A startled barista began to protest but fell silent as Samuel pressed a $100 bill into his hand. We were never here, Samuel said quietly. The back alley behind Mozart's was poorly lit and flanked by dumpsters. Jamie led them toward a blue Honda Civic, parked half a block away. They'll be watching your hotel, she warned, unlocking the car, and Ms. Simmons Fisher's location too, if they've identified her movement patterns. How do you know about Ilara? Samuel demanded, hesitating before entering the vehicle. Because they've been monitoring both of you, Jamie explained impatiently. Get in, Mr. Fisher. We have maybe 3 minutes before they check the alley. Samuel slid into the passenger seat, clutching the USB drive Jamie had given him. As they pulled onto Enfield Road, he checked the burner phone. 3 missed calls from Ilara. I need to contact my wife, he said. Not yet, Jamie advised, navigating through residential streets rather than main thoroughfares. They're almost certainly monitoring cell towers for new activations, matching your movement patterns. Burners aren't foolproof anymore. Where are we going? Samuel asked, increasingly uneasy despite Jamie's apparent help. Somewhere secure to review the evidence, she replied, turning onto Mopac Expressway heading north. I have a workspace at a co-op tech hub in the domain. Private entrance, robust security, and most importantly, no connection to either of us on paper. Samuel studied her profile in the dim light of passing street lamps. You've been planning this for some time. Since I realized the extent of their scheme, yes, Jamie confirmed. Riviera isn't just after control of Fisher Tech, Mr. Fisher. This is about your neural adaptation patents, the ones based on your wife's research. The technology has military applications that could be worth billions to the right government contractors. The revelation struck Samuel like a physical blow. Ilara's research, which he had initially dismissed as too theoretical, had indeed formed the foundation for Fisher Tech's most valuable intellectual property, patents that Riviera, with his defense industry connections, would be ideally positioned to monetize. And MIT's sudden interest in Ilara? Samuel asked, though he suspected the answer. A distraction, Jamie confirmed. Get her out of Austin, isolate her from you and the company, then quietly acquire control of the patents during the corporate restructuring. By the time she realized what had happened, it would be too late. And Danica, my child, Samuel could barely voice the question. Jamie's expression softened with genuine sympathy. Insurance. If you fought back legally, they'd have leverage over you through the pregnancy. And if you didn't, if you accepted defeat and retreated into a new family life, they'd have effectively neutralized you as a threat. Samuel stared out the window, the Austin skyline receding behind them as they drove north. The calculated cruelty of using an unborn child as corporate leverage made him physically ill. Did she know? He asked quietly. From the beginning. Jamie hesitated. The evidence suggests she was recruited specifically for this operation. There are payments, training protocols, psychological profiles on you, your preferences, vulnerabilities, patterns. The coffee Samuel had consumed threatened to come back up. 18 months of intimacy, every confession, every moment of connection, revealed as professional manipulation. Even knowing it intellectually didn't prepare him for the visceral betrayal. "I need to see everything," he said, his voice hardening. "All of it." 20 minutes later, they arrived at a modern glass building in the Domain, Austin's upscale business and retail district. Jamie led him through a service entrance, using multiple key cards to access a small but well-equipped office space on the 4th floor. "Welcome to my panic room," she said, activating systems with practiced efficiency. Off-grid power backup, air-gapped computers for reviewing sensitive materials, and a decent coffee machine. Under different circumstances, Samuel might have been impressed by the young woman's foresight. Now he focused solely on the USB drive that might contain the full measure of his humiliation and the path to his redemption. "Before we start," Jamie said, connecting the drive to a standalone computer, "you should contact your wife. Use this." She handed him a satellite phone. "Untraceable, at least temporarily. But be brief. Assume everything you say is compromised." Samuel dialed the number for Ilara's burner phone, his heart pounding as it rang. "Samuel," Ilara's voice carried unmistakable relief. "Where are you? 2 men came to the hotel room looking for you. I barely got out through the service elevator." "Are you safe?" he asked urgently. "Yes, I'm with Brooke." Samuel froze. "Brooke? Jamie just showed me evidence suggesting she might be compromised." A brief silence followed. "She came to the hotel after you left. Said she had proof Riviera was working with federal authorities on an indictment against you. She seemed genuinely concerned, Samuel." Samuel looked to Jamie, who was shaking her head emphatically. "Ilara, listen carefully," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Brooke may be part of this. You need to get away from her immediately." "That's absurd," Ilara replied. "She's been your legal counsel for years. She helped us file the neural network adaptation patents." "Exactly," Samuel insisted. "She has intimate knowledge of our most valuable intellectual property. Ilara, please, find an excuse to leave. Now." Another pause, longer this time. "She's offering to drive me to a safe house in Lake Travis," Ilara finally said. "Says Riviera's people won't think to look there." "Don't go," Samuel urged. "Make an excuse. Say you need to use the restroom, anything. Just get away." "Okay," Ilara whispered. "I'll call you back." The line went dead, leaving Samuel staring at the satellite phone in mounting panic. "If Brooke's involved," he said to Jamie, "Ilara's in immediate danger." "We should review the evidence first," Jamie advised, gesturing to the monitor, where files from the USB drive were already organized in folders. "Confirm Brooke's role before you do anything rash." Samuel nodded reluctantly, moving to stand behind Jamie as she navigated through the files. The first folder contained email exchanges between Riviera and Whitman, dating back nearly 2 years. The conversations began innocuously, discussions of potential academic industry partnerships, but quickly evolved into explicit planning. "The wife is the key," Riviera had written in one email from March 2023. "Her research underpins their most valuable patents, but Fisher has marginalized her contributions. Classical vulnerability pattern, professional frustration, personal neglect. W. Will make initial academic approach in Q3. They identified Ilara as your weak point," Jamie explained unnecessarily. "Exploited the growing distance between you." The next folder contained surveillance reports on Samuel's movements, with particular attention to his recurring trips to San Francisco. A detailed profile of his preferences in women, his typical business travel patterns, and recommended approaches for making contact painted a chilling picture of premeditated seduction. "And this," Jamie said, opening a video file, "is from a Fisher Tech boardroom meeting that wasn't on any official calendar. 3 months ago. The footage showed Riviera, Whitman, Marcus, and to Samuel's dismay, Brooke, seated around the conference table after hours. "The MIT position is secured," Whitman was saying on screen. "She'll accept. It's too prestigious to decline, especially given the domestic situation." "And Fisher?" Riviera asked. "Still completely in the dark," Marcus replied with a smile that turned Samuel's stomach. The beautiful irony is that he's actually relieved she's considering leaving. Makes his own exit strategy simpler. "Speaking of which," Brooke interjected, "Danica reports the pregnancy is progressing normally. First trimester screening shows no abnormalities." "Perfect timing," Riviera nodded appreciatively. "By the time we execute the board maneuver, he'll be thoroughly distracted by impending fatherhood and divorce proceedings." "And the patents?" Whitman inquired. "Already preparing the reassignment documentation," Brooke confirmed. "During the transition period, legal oversight will fall to me. I can ensure the intellectual property is properly secured before anyone realizes its significance." Samuel stepped back from the screen, physically repulsed by the calculated betrayal of his oldest professional allies. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would Marcus do this? Why would Brooke?" Jamie closed the video file, turning to face him. "Money, primarily. Riviera offered Marcus the permanent CTO position with significantly expanded equity. And Brooke," she hesitated. "Brooke appears to have more personal motivations." "Meaning?" Jamie opened another folder, revealing photographs of Brooke and Riviera in intimate situations, entering hotel rooms, dining at secluded restaurants, embracing in a private residence. "They've been involved for approximately 16 months, Jamie explained. "Based on the communications I've intercepted, their relationship predates the conspiracy against you." Samuel sank into a nearby chair, the cumulative weight of betrayal threatening to crush him. His oldest friend, his trusted legal counsel, his pregnant lover, all orchestrated by a man whose corporate ambitions apparently knew no ethical boundaries. The satellite phone rang, startling both of them. Samuel answered immediately. "I'm clear," Ilara said without preamble, her voice hushed and strained. "Said I needed feminine products from the convenience store. She offered to go for me, but I insisted, walking north on Congress Avenue now." "Can you get to the domain?" Samuel asked. "We're at a secure location with evidence of the entire conspiracy." "I can get a rideshare," Ilara confirmed. "But Samuel, Brooke received a call just before I left. I heard her say something about accelerating the timeline and securing the target. I think they know you have evidence." Samuel looked to Jamie, who was already checking security feeds on another monitor. "They'll track the rideshare account," she warned, "and facial recognition might flag her at the domain entrances." "We need to move," Samuel decided. "Pick up Ilara somewhere less obvious and go directly to people who can help us." "Who exactly do you trust at this point?" Jamie asked reasonably. The question pierced Samuel's confidence. With Marcus and Brooke revealed as traitors, his circle of trust had contracted dramatically. Who remained beyond suspicion? Who had the power to counter Riviera's far-reaching influence? A sudden realization dawned. "The board meeting tomorrow," he said. "Riviera's called the full board to review the evidence supposedly vindicating me." "It's likely a trap," Jamie cautioned. "Or an opportunity," Samuel countered. "If we can present your evidence directly to the full board, Riviera won't be able to control the narrative. Some directors, like Jennifer Liang and Robert Carmanos, have no connection to Riviera. They'd have no reason to protect him if presented with clear evidence of corporate espionage and fraud." Jamie considered this, nodding slowly. "It could work, but we'd need to secure the evidence and ensure your physical safety until the meeting." The satellite phone rang again. Ilara. "Change of plans?" she said without greeting. "Brooke just texted me. She's figured out I'm not coming back and she's—" "Hold on." A brief pause. "She sent a screenshot of a text conversation with you from 20 minutes ago, asking her to bring me to the domain. But Samuel, you never sent that." Cold dread washed over Samuel. "They're spoofing our communications. Where are you now?" "In a lift heading north on I-35, Ilara replied. "But something's wrong. We just passed the exit for my requested destination, and the driver's ignoring me." Samuel's mind raced. "Can you share your location from the rideshare app?" "I tried." Ilara's voice tightened with fear. "The app is frozen." "Samuel, I think this isn't a real lift. The driver's wearing some kind of earpiece." Jamie was already moving, gathering equipment with practiced efficiency. "They're bringing her to us," she said grimly. "Or trying to. They must have tracked the satellite connection." "Stay on the line," Samuel instructed Ilara. "We're coming to you." "No time," Jamie countered, tossing him a set of car keys. "Take my car. South Garage, level B2, space 2R17. I'll coordinate from here using traffic cameras to track her vehicle." "You're not coming?" Samuel asked, surprised. "Someone needs to secure the evidence," Jamie replied, already copying files to multiple backup drives, "and guide you to her location. Go, now." Samuel didn't waste time arguing. With the keys and satellite phone in hand, he raced to the parking garage. Jamie's blue Civic chirped as he unlocked it remotely, sliding into the driver's seat with desperate urgency. "I'm in the car," he reported to Ilara. "Can you see any landmarks? Street signs?" "We just passed a sign for Highway 183, Ilara replied, her voice admirably calm despite the circumstances. "Heading west now. The doors are locked, Samuel. Child safety locks activated." "I'll find you," he promised, pulling out of the garage and heading toward the nearest entrance to Highway 183. "Jamie will track your vehicle using traffic cameras." As if on cue, Jamie's voice came through the satellite phone, which was now on speaker. "I've got a visual on a black Chevy Suburban matching your timeline, westbound on 183 passing Mopac. License plate TXD 7291. Can you confirm, Ilara?" "I can't see the plate from inside," Ilara replied. "But it's definitely a black Suburban." "Stay on the main road," Jamie instructed Samuel. "I'll guide you to intercept. They appear to be heading toward Lakeway." Samuel pushed the Honda to its limits, weaving through the minimal late-night traffic on Highway 183. The city lights began to thin as they headed west toward the Hill Country and Lake Travis area. "Any idea where they're taking her?" he asked Jamie. "Based on their trajectory, possibly one of several private properties owned by shell companies connected to Riviera," Jamie replied. "He maintains a compound near Lakeway for corporate retreats. Isolated, private security, boat access to the lake. Why take her there?" Samuel wondered aloud. "What do they gain by abducting her now?" "Leverage," Ilara answered herself, her voice tight but controlled. "They know you have evidence against them. I'm their insurance policy." The simple logic of it struck Samuel with sickening clarity. With Ilara as hostage, they could force him to surrender Jamie's evidence, effectively neutralizing the threat to their conspiracy. "They're turning onto Lakeway Boulevard," Jamie reported. "You're approximately 4 minutes behind them. I'm sending coordinates to the sat phone's GPS." Samuel followed the directions, pushing the modest Honda as fast as it would go along the winding roads of the affluent lakeside community, million-dollar homes perched on hillsides overlooking Lake Travis, most dark at this late hour. "I think we're stopping," Ilara whispered. "Gated entrance. Private road. Lakeway Vista Court," Jamie confirmed. "Riviera's compound is at the end of that road. Half-mile private drive, security gate with guard station." "How do I get to her?" Samuel demanded, nearing the turnoff. "You don't," Jamie replied bluntly. "Not alone, not without getting both of you killed. We need law enforcement." "After everything we've seen, you want to trust the police," Samuel countered. "Riviera has connections everywhere. They could be compromised too." "Not everyone," Jamie insisted. "I've been preparing for this scenario, Mr. Fisher. There are still people within the system who can't be bought." "The driver's getting a call," Ilara interrupted, her voice barely audible. He's saying they should wait for Riviera before bringing me inside. Something about the other package being secured first." Samuel's blood ran cold. "What other package?" A sudden impact jolted the Honda, sending it skidding toward the shoulder. Samuel fought the steering wheel, narrowly avoiding a guardrail as he glimpsed a dark SUV behind him, accelerating for another strike. "I'm being pursued," he reported tersely, accelerating away from the threat. "Black SUV, tinted windows." "They must have been waiting for you," Jamie realized. "Mr. Fisher, you need to get out of there now. If they capture you too, we lose everything." The SUV rammed him again, harder this time. The Honda's lighter frame stood little chance against the deliberate assault. Samuel struggled to maintain control as the road curved sharply around a hillside, Lake Travis glittering darkly below. "Samuel?" Ilara's voice carried rising panic. "What's happening?" "I'll be fine," he lied, swerving to avoid another impact. "Jamie, I need options. How do I reach Ilara?" The answer came not from Jamie, but from the road ahead, where 2 more SUVs now blocked his path, forming an impromptu roadblock. Samuel hit the brakes, the Honda skidding on the asphalt as he desperately sought an escape route. There was none. The pursuing vehicle closed in behind him, while armed men emerged from the roadblock ahead, weapons drawn and aimed at his car. "Samuel?" Ilara's voice called from the speaker. "Samuel, answer me!" He reached for the phone, but before he could respond, the driver's window shattered. Something struck his neck, a sharp sting followed by spreading numbness. As darkness encroached on his vision, Samuel heard Jamie's voice from the satellite phone, increasingly distant. "Mr. Fisher, Mr. Fisher, they've found my location. Someone inside Fisher Tech must have—" The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only static as Samuel slumped against the steering wheel, consciousness fading. His last coherent thought was of Ilara, brilliant, loyal Ilara, who deserved far better than the fate his mistakes had engineered for them both. Consciousness returned to Samuel in waves, each bringing sharper pain and clearer awareness. His mouth felt desert dry, his thoughts sluggish and disjointed. When he finally managed to open his eyes, the space around him gradually came into focus. A modernist room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Travis, its waters reflecting the first hints of dawn. He was seated in a leather armchair, his wrists secured to the armrests with plastic zip ties. Experimental pressure confirmed they were pulled tight enough to prevent escape, but not circulation. Professional work. "Water?" a familiar voice asked from somewhere to his left. Samuel turned his head, wincing at the resulting throb of pain. Marcus Chen stood beside a sleek wet bar, holding a glass of water with a straw. "Why?" Samuel croaked, ignoring the offered drink. Marcus sighed, setting the glass on a side table within Samuel's reach. "It's complicated." "Try me?" Samuel challenged, his voice gaining strength as the drugged fog continued to lift. 18 years of friendship deserves at least an explanation." Marcus paced to the window, silhouetted against the emerging sunrise. "You stopped listening, Samuel, years ago. You had this brilliant, insightful woman beside you offering revolutionary ideas, and you repeatedly dismissed her research as too theoretical." He turned, his expression surprisingly earnest. "Do you have any idea what Ilara's neural adaptation models are actually worth? Not just commercially, but strategically." "Apparently enough to justify betraying your oldest friend," Samuel replied coldly. "It wasn't personal," Marcus insisted. "At least not initially. Riviera approached me after you shelved the third iteration of Ilara's adaptive learning protocol. He recognized its potential immediately. Applications in defense systems, autonomous weapons platforms, intelligence analysis. Billions in government contracts that you were too focused on consumer applications to pursue. So this is about money," Samuel concluded flatly. Marcus shook his head. "It's about vision, about recognizing transformative technology and ensuring it reaches its full potential. You were limiting what Fisher Tech could become. By refusing to turn my wife's research into weapons," Samuel stated, the irony bitter on his tongue. Now, when it was far too late, he finally understood the true value of what Ilara had created and what he had failed to protect. "Where is she?" he demanded, straining against his restraints. "Where's Ilara?" "Safe," another voice answered, as Arthur Riviera entered the room, immaculately dressed despite the early hour. "And considerably more comfortable than you, I assure you." Brooke followed him into the room, avoiding Samuel's gaze entirely. The three architects of his downfall now stood before him, their conspiracy fully realized. "What happened to Jamie Jiang?" Samuel asked, dreading the answer. "Ms. Jiang has been dealt with," Riviera replied dismissively, "though I must commend her ingenuity. We didn't realize she'd been documenting our activities until quite recently. A significant oversight on our part." Samuel's stomach twisted at the casual way Riviera spoke of dealing with Jamie. "If you've hurt her—" "Spare me the empty threats," Riviera interrupted. "You're hardly in a position to make demands." He settled into an opposite chair, regarding Samuel with the clinical interest of a scientist observing a specimen. "Though I am curious about one thing. When did you begin to suspect a coordinated effort? We were quite careful." "Not careful enough," Samuel replied, seeing no reason to conceal the truth now. "Jamie's anonymous texts led me to the notary discrepancy on the Horizon Ventures documents. From there, the connections became increasingly obvious." Riviera nodded appreciatively. "Ms. Jiang was indeed thorough. Unfortunately for you, her evidence is now secure and will never reach the board." "What's your endgame here?" Samuel asked. "You can't just make me disappear. Too many people would ask questions." "Disappear? Hardly necessary." Riviera smiled thinly. You're going to resign as CEO citing personal reasons, the stress of impending fatherhood with Ms. Winters, perhaps, or the desire to support your wife's prestigious position at MIT. The board will reluctantly accept, I'll assume interim leadership, and life will continue. And if I refuse, Riviera's smile vanished. Then this becomes significantly less pleasant for everyone involved, particularly Alara. The threat, however veiled, ignited Samuel's fury. If you touch her, you'll what? Riviera challenged. Your position is untenable, Samuel. We have documented evidence of your embezzlement through Horizon Ventures. We have your pregnant mistress prepared to testify about your increasingly erratic behavior. We have your trusted legal counsel. He gestured toward Brooke, who continued to avoid eye contact. Ready to confirm your discussions about divorcing Alara and transferring assets offshore. All fabricated, Samuel insisted. Perhaps, Riviera conceded, but perception becomes reality in these situations. By the time any investigation determined the truth, your reputation and career would be irreparably damaged. He leaned forward. Or you can accept a generous severance package, retain your equity stake as a silent partner, and walk away with your dignity relatively intact. The offer was more reasonable than Samuel had expected, instantly triggering his suspicion. What's the catch? Smart man, Riviera nodded approvingly. The catch, as you put it, is that the neural adaptation patents transfer completely to Fisher Tech. No personal claims, no royalties beyond your standard equity position. And there it was, the true objective of the entire elaborate scheme. Not just to remove Samuel as CEO, but to secure unchallenged corporate control of Alara's revolutionary technology. Those patents are jointly held, Samuel pointed out. Alara would need to agree to any transfer. Riviera waved this away. Already arranged. The MIT position comes with certain publishing and patent requirements that would necessitate reassignment. She'll sign eventually, whether she initially intends to or not. The calculated efficiency of their plan left Samuel momentarily speechless. They had considered every angle, leveraged every vulnerability, orchestrated every contingency. How could he possibly counter such comprehensive manipulation? I need to see Alara, he finally said, before I agree to anything. Riviera hesitated, then nodded to Marcus. Bring Dr. Simmons Fisher. Perhaps she can help her husband understand the wisdom of cooperation. After Marcus left, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Brooke remained near the doorway, a study in conflicted loyalty. Samuel finally addressed her directly. Did you ever actually care about Fisher Tech? Or was it always about positioning yourself with Riviera? Brooke flinched, finally meeting his gaze. The company was never the target, Samuel. Just your leadership of it. You've made increasingly questionable decisions, prioritizing growth over sustainability, publicity over substance. And sleeping with Riviera was your solution? Samuel asked acidly. That came later, she replied, a hint of defiance entering her voice. After I realized the potential of what we were building, what Alara had created, and how you were squandering it, Arthur recognized its value immediately. Its military value, Samuel clarified. Its transformative value, Riviera corrected, rejoining the conversation. In the right hands with appropriate resources and connections, Fisher Tech could become the backbone of the next generation of intelligent systems, not just consumer gadgets and predictive algorithms for social media platforms. And those right hands are yours, I suppose, Samuel said bitterly. Mine, Marcus's, even Brooke's, Riviera confirmed. A leadership team with the vision and connections to realize the technology's full potential. The door opened and Marcus returned with Alara. Samuel's breath caught at the sight of her, physically unharmed but visibly exhausted, her eyes brightening with relief when she saw him. Samuel, she breathed, moving toward him before Marcus caught her arm. Are you okay? Samuel asked urgently. Did they hurt you? I'm fine, she assured him, her analytical gaze already assessing his restraints and condition. Though our hosts have been somewhat forceful in their hospitality, Riviera chuckled. Sharp as ever, Dr. Simmons Fisher. I've always admired your intellect. Save it, Alara replied coldly. I know exactly what you want, and you won't get it. The neural adaptation protocols are my life's work. I'll never allow them to be weaponized. Such idealism, Riviera sighed. Admirable, but ultimately impractical. The technology exists, if not through us, then through competitors who've already begun reverse engineering your published frameworks. At least with Fisher Tech, you retain some connection, some influence over its application. Ilara's gaze flicked to Samuel, silently communicating in the way long-married couples often do. Despite everything that had transpired between them personally, in this moment they were unified against a common threat. "What exactly are you proposing?" Ilara asked, her tone shifting to something more measured. Riviera, sensing potential cooperation, outlined his offer again. Samuel's resignation, generous severance, continued equity stake, and complete transfer of the neural adaptation patents to Fisher Tech. Ilara listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. "And what about MIT?" she asked when he finished. "A legitimate offer," Riviera assured her. "Your academic career proceeds exactly as planned. The fellowship is genuine, the research opportunities real. Only the timing and motivation behind the recruitment were orchestrated." "And Danica Winters," Ilara continued, her voice perfectly steady as she named her husband's mistress. "Was her pregnancy part of your orchestration as well?" The question hung in the air, Samuel equally desperate to hear the answer. "Not initially," Marcus surprisingly responded. "The relationship was planned, yes, but the pregnancy was Ms. Winters' own initiative, an unexpected but ultimately useful development." The confirmation of Danica's deliberate deception struck Samuel like a physical blow. Everything, every intimate moment, every shared hope for their future, every supposed accident and coincidence that had drawn them together, had been calculated manipulation. "And if we refuse your generous offer?" Ilara asked, maintaining her composure. Riviera's expression hardened. "Then the evidence of Samuel's financial improprieties becomes public. Fisher Tech stock plummets. The board removes him forcibly rather than accepting a graceful resignation. Your husband likely faces criminal charges, and the stress of the situation regrettably causes complications with Ms. Winters' pregnancy. Tragedy all around." "You're forgetting something," Samuel interjected. "Jamie Zhang has evidence of your entire conspiracy. Copies exist that you haven't secured." "Ms. Zhang was quite thorough," Riviera acknowledged, "but also quite alone. When a single person makes accusations against a unified group of respected executives, who do you imagine people believe? Particularly when that person has a documented history of mental health issues." "What?" Samuel demanded. "Ms. Zhang's personnel file indicates treatment for paranoid tendencies following a traumatic family financial collapse in her teens," Brooke explained clinically. "A fact we overlooked during her hiring, but which proves quite convenient now. The calculated cruelty of using Jamie's childhood trauma against her further sickened Samuel. These people had considered every angle, anticipated every potential weakness, created contingencies for every scenario. "We need time to discuss this privately," Ilara stated firmly. "If you expect any cooperation, that's non-negotiable." Riviera considered this briefly, then nodded. 5 minutes. "Marcus will remain in the room, but at a distance. We're not barbarians, despite what you may think." After Riviera and Brooke exited, Marcus positioned himself by the door, ostensibly giving them privacy while maintaining visual surveillance. Ilara immediately moved to Samuel's side, her fingers working at his restraints while maintaining the appearance of simply holding his hand. "They haven't found all of Jamie's evidence," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "She contacted me directly before they took her. Backup files are with Jennifer Liang from the board. Dead man switch activated if Jamie doesn't check in by 8 a.m. Hope flickered in Samuel's chest for the first time since regaining consciousness. Jennifer Liang, Fisher Tech's most independent board member, had always maintained professional distance from both Samuel and Riviera's factions. If she received Jamie's evidence— "What time is it now?" he whispered back. "Almost 7, Ilara replied, still working on his restraint. "We need to store them for at least an hour." Samuel nodded minutely, mindful of Marcus watching from across the room. "What about Danica? Is she here?" "In another room," Ilara confirmed. "I heard them discussing her when they brought me in. She's not entirely a willing participant anymore, from what I gathered. Got cold feet when they moved from corporate espionage to actual abduction." A tiny thread of the zip tie gave way under Ilara's persistent manipulation. Samuel kept his expression neutral, fighting the urge to glance at his wrist. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, the words carrying the weight of months of betrayal. "For everything. Danica, the affair, dismissing your research. I've been an absolute fool." Ilara's fingers paused briefly before resuming their work on the restraint. Yes, you have, she agreed softly, but that's a conversation for later if we survive this particular crisis. The simple possibility of later, that she hadn't completely written him off despite his betrayal, gave Samuel renewed determination. We need to get to Jennifer Liang before they realize the evidence is with her. There's more, Ilara whispered urgently. Jamie said the original source of the anonymous texts wasn't her. She was working with someone else inside Fisher Tech, someone higher up, with access to Riviera's inner circle. Samuel's mind raced through possibilities. Who else could have had both the access and motivation to expose the conspiracy? Before he could speculate further, the zip tie on his right wrist finally snapped, though he maintained the position to conceal his partial freedom. The door opened as Riviera returned, followed by Brooke and, surprisingly, Danica Winters. Seeing her in person for the first time since learning of her betrayal, Samuel was struck by how different she appeared. The carefree sensuality that had so attracted him was gone, replaced by visible anxiety. Her hand rested protectively over her slightly swollen abdomen, a gesture that still provoked complicated emotions, despite knowing the conception had been calculated. Ms. Winters insisted on being present for this discussion, Riviera explained, his tone suggesting irritation with the deviation from his plan. Danica avoided Samuel's gaze initially, then forced herself to meet it directly. I didn't know it would go this far, she said, her voice smaller than he remembered. Corporate intelligence was one thing, but this, she gestured at Samuel's restraints. This isn't what I agreed to. How very convenient to develop a conscience now, Ilara remarked coolly. Your decision time has expired, Riviera interrupted, clearly displeased by Danica's unexpected appearance. What will it be, Samuel? The reasonable path forward or the unnecessarily destructive one? Samuel exchanged a quick glance with Ilara, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. I need assurances, he stalled. Written guarantees about my equity position, Ilara's continued patent recognition, protection for the child Danica is carrying. All easily arranged, Riviera agreed, too readily. Brooke can draft the necessary documents immediately. And what about the board meeting scheduled for this morning? Samuel pressed. It's set for 8 a.m., if I recall. Won't my absence raise questions? A flicker of annoyance crossed Riviera's face. The meeting has been postponed due to your family emergency. The board has been notified that you're dealing with a personal matter and will communicate your decision about continuing as CEO within 48 hours. Very efficient, Samuel observed. Though I wonder how Jennifer Liang responded to that. She's generally quite insistent on proper governance procedures. The subtle probe hit its mark. Riviera's expression tightened fractionally. Ms. Liang has been appropriately informed, like all board members. Samuel nodded thoughtfully, continuing to stall. And the evidence Jamie Zhang collected? I assume you've secured all copies? Ms. Zhang's delusional accusations have been contained, Riviera confirmed confidently. Her access to Fisher Tech systems has been revoked, and any supposed evidence she compiled is now in our possession, including the files she sent to Jennifer Liang? Ilara asked innocently. The room went suddenly, dangerously still. Riviera's expression hardened as he turned to Marcus. You assured me all external communications were intercepted. They were, Marcus insisted, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. We monitored all her known accounts, devices, and communication channels. Apparently not all of them, Samuel observed, allowing himself a small smile. Jamie was more resourceful than you anticipated. Riviera's composure cracked, revealing the ruthless calculation beneath his polished exterior. Marcus, call Liang immediately. Brooke, prepare contingency statements about Zhang's mental instability and unauthorized access to sensitive corporate information. As his conspirators scrambled to contain this new threat, Riviera turned back to Samuel and Ilara, his expression now openly menacing. This changes nothing. You're still in my custody, without means of communication or escape. By the time any evidence reaches the proper authorities, the situation here can be resolved. The implicit threat hung heavy in the air. Samuel tensed, sensing the situation deteriorating rapidly. His right hand was free, but his left remained secured, and he was still outnumbered and potentially outgunned. Arthur, this wasn't the agreement, Brooke protested, her professionalism finally giving way to genuine alarm. Corporate restructuring is one thing. Threatening physical harm crosses every legal and ethical line. The time for half measures has passed. Riviera snapped. Too much has been invested to fail now because of some IT security employee's misguided crusade for justice. Samuel caught Ilara's eye, silently communicating a warning to be ready. Whatever happened next would unfold quickly. Danica had edged closer to the door, her earlier bravado replaced by visible fear as she witnessed Riviera's mask slipping. Marcus ended his call, his expression grave. Liang's not answering, and the board meeting, the real one, not our postponed version, begins in 20 minutes. She'll be there, along with everyone else expecting Samuel's appearance. Then we accelerate our timeline, Riviera decided coldly. Samuel signs the resignation and patent transfer immediately, with appropriate backdating. We release the statement about his personal difficulties and he was interrupted by the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching, growing rapidly louder. Everyone froze, attention drawn to the windows, where a black helicopter was now visible, descending toward the property's helipad, visible on a lower terrace. "Are we expecting someone?" Brooke asked nervously. Riviera's face drained of color. "That's not one of ours." The next moments unfolded in controlled chaos. Riviera barked orders at Marcus to secure the property while reaching inside his jacket. For a phone or weapon, Samuel couldn't be sure. Taking advantage of the distraction, he finally revealed his freed right hand, immediately working to release his left wrist. Ilara, showing remarkable presence of mind, moved swiftly toward Danica. "If you meant what you said about not wanting this, now's the time to prove it," she whispered urgently. "Side door, down the hall. Can you get us out?" To Samuel's surprise, Danica nodded without hesitation. Service stairs to the lower terrace. The staff used them. Brooke, caught between loyalties and self-preservation, made a decision that surprised everyone. "Arthur, it's over," she stated firmly. "Whatever you're planning next, I won't be part of it." She moved deliberately to block his path to Samuel. "The helicopter is probably FBI. Jamie must have gone to federal authorities with evidence of interstate corporate espionage." Riviera regarded her with cold fury. "After everything we've built, you choose now to develop principles?" "Not principles," Brooke corrected. "Self-preservation. There's a line between aggressive corporate maneuvering and criminal conspiracy. You've crossed it, and I won't go down with you." The momentary standoff gave Samuel the precious seconds needed to free his left hand. In one fluid motion, he rose from the chair, positioning himself protectively in front of Ilara. "This is finished, Arthur," he declared, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Whatever happens next, your reputation and career are over. The only question is whether you face those consequences with dignity or add kidnapping and assault to the charges." Before Riviera could respond, the mansion's security system chimed, indicating breached perimeters. Multiple vehicles could now be heard approaching on the private drive, their sirens cutting through the morning quiet. Riviera's careful composure finally shattered completely. "This isn't over," he snarled, backing toward a side door different from the one Danica had indicated. "Marcus, the contingency files!" Marcus hesitated, visibly torn between following his co-conspirator and surrendering to the approaching authorities. "Arthur, we should—" But Riviera was already gone, disappearing through the door, presumably toward some prepared escape route. Marcus stared after him, then at Samuel and Ilara, 18 years of friendship and recent betrayal hanging unresolved between them. "I truly believed we were doing the right thing for the technology," he said quietly, "that you were limiting its potential." "By refusing to weaponize it?" Samuel challenged. Marcus shook his head. "By refusing to see beyond consumer applications. The adaptive learning protocols could revolutionize everything from medical diagnostics to climate modeling. Not just weapons, Samuel, but you were so focused on quarterly profits and market share." Further conversation was interrupted as the front entry door burst open, revealing federal agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn. "FBI, everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them." As they complied, Samuel caught sight of Jamie Zhang entering behind the agents, accompanied by Jennifer Liang and, surprisingly, Nathan Whitman, the MIT professor who had supposedly been part of the conspiracy. "Samuel Fisher and Ilara Simmons Fisher," one agent called out. "Are you injured?" "We're unharmed," Ilara confirmed, though she remained protectively close to Samuel. Arthur Riviera just fled through that door. As agents moved to pursue, Jamie approached them. looking remarkably composed despite the circumstances. "I'm sorry it took so long to reach you," she said. "We had to ensure the evidence was secure and properly documented before moving in." "We?" Samuel questioned, looking at Whitman with undisguised suspicion. "Dr. Whitman has been working with us from the beginning," Jamie explained. The MIT offer was genuine, but when Riviera approached him about using it as part of their scheme, he contacted federal authorities. He's been gathering evidence on their conspiracy for months. Samuel turned to Whitman in disbelief. "You were the original anonymous texter, the one sending me clues before Jamie got involved." Whitman nodded. "I couldn't approach you directly without alerting Riviera's people, but I could drop breadcrumbs, hoping you'd follow the trail." He looked apologetically at Ilara. "The MIT offer is still open, by the way. No strings attached this time." As federal agents secured the scene, taking Brooke and Marcus into custody and establishing a perimeter to capture Riviera, Samuel found himself standing beside Ilara in a quiet corner of the room, away from the immediate chaos. "I don't even know where to begin," he said quietly, "with apologies, explanations, or gratitude for your help when I least deserved it." Ilara regarded him thoughtfully. "I suggest beginning with the truth, the complete truth. No more secrets, no more compartmentalized lives. If there's anything this ordeal has taught me, it's that deception destroys everything it touches." Samuel nodded, acutely aware of how his own deceptions had created vulnerabilities that Riviera's team had expertly exploited. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said honestly, "but I want you to know that seeing everything clearly now, how I dismissed your research, how I took you for granted, how I betrayed your trust, I understand what I lost." "What about Danica?" Ilara asked directly. "And the child?" Samuel glanced across the room where Danica sat speaking with federal agents, one hand still protectively covering her abdomen. "If the pregnancy is real, I'll support them both, of course. But any relationship beyond that?" He shook his head. "I can't imagine building anything genuine from such comprehensive deception." "Rather ironic, coming from you," Ilara observed, though without the bitterness he might have expected. "Deserved," Samuel acknowledged. "I've been a hypocrite in more ways than I can count." An FBI agent approached, interrupting their conversation. "Mr. Fisher, Dr. Simmons Fisher, we need your formal statements. And there's something you should know. We've apprehended Riviera attempting to board a boat on the lake. He had transfer documents for your neural adaptation patents on his person, along with forged signatures. Will the charges stick?" Samuel asked. "Corporate espionage, conspiracy, kidnapping, assault, fraud. Yes, they'll stick," the agent confirmed. "Though the investigation is ongoing, particularly regarding the extent of involvement from others at Fisher Tech." As the agent led them toward separate interview areas, Samuel caught Ilara's hand gently. "Whatever happens next with the company, with us, it's your decision. Your research, your life, your terms. I've forfeited any right to expectations." Ilara's expression softened slightly. "We'll see," she said, neither promising reconciliation nor closing the door completely. "First, let's ensure Fisher Tech survives this crisis. The neural adaptation technology is too important to be lost in corporate collapse or legal entanglements." Samuel nodded, releasing her hand. As they parted to give their statements, he was struck by Ilara's continued concern for the technology's future, despite the personal betrayals she'd endured. Her commitment to the work itself, regardless of personal cost, highlighted everything he'd failed to appreciate about her and everything he'd compromised in himself along the way. 6 weeks later, Samuel stood at the large windows of what had once been his office at Fisher Tech headquarters, now temporarily occupied by Jennifer Liang as interim CEO. The Austin skyline stretched before him, unchanged despite how dramatically his own world had shifted. "The board's decision is final," Jennifer was saying behind him. "Marcus and Brooke have been removed permanently, with their equity positions frozen pending legal outcomes. Riviera's assets within the company have been seized as evidence of conspiracy." Samuel nodded, turning back to face her. "And my position?" Jennifer's expression remained neutral. "You built this company, Samuel. No one disputes that. But you also created the vulnerabilities that nearly destroyed it, both through your personal choices and your management approaches." "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll submit my formal resignation immediately." "That's not what I'm suggesting," Jennifer corrected. "The board proposes a restructured leadership model. You would remain as Chief Innovation Officer, focusing on product development and strategic partnerships, your genuine strengths. I would continue as CEO, handling operational and financial oversight. And Ilara? Samuel asked, surprised by the unexpected offer. Doctor, Simmons-Fisher has accepted a modified position with MIT that allows her to split her time between Cambridge and Austin, Jennifer explained. She'll head a new advanced research division at Fisher Tech, with complete autonomy over the neural adaptation technology's development and application, non-military applications only, per her requirement. The elegant solution addressed multiple issues simultaneously, maintaining corporate continuity, while implementing necessary ethical guardrails and respecting Ilara's boundaries. She agreed to this? Samuel asked, unable to keep the hope from his voice. With conditions, Jennifer confirmed, professional boundaries between your roles, complete transparency in all corporate decisions, and regular ethics committee oversight of technology applications. Samuel nodded, accepting the reasonable restrictions. And personally, did she say anything about... Jennifer's expression softened slightly. That's between you and her, Samuel, though I understand she's keeping the house in Westlake Hills while you've moved downtown. Temporary arrangements, Samuel acknowledged, until things become clearer between us. After concluding his meeting with Jennifer, Samuel rode the elevator down to the lobby, his future at Fisher Tech more defined, but his personal life still in limbo. As he crossed the atrium, he spotted a familiar figure waiting near the security desk, Danica. Her pregnancy was more visible now, approaching the end of the first trimester. She'd been cooperative with federal investigators, receiving immunity in exchange for testimony against Riviera. Samuel had maintained minimal contact, primarily through attorneys regarding financial support for the child. Samuel, she greeted him uncertainly. Thank you for agreeing to meet. You said it was important, he replied neutrally, as they moved to a seating area with some privacy. Danica took a deep breath. I've been offered a position in Chicago. Good company. Fresh start. She placed a hand on her stomach. I think it would be better for everyone if we put some distance between all this. Samuel studied her, searching for the manipulation that had characterized their relationship. Instead, he found only tired resignation and what appeared to be genuine regret. I'll still provide support, he assured her, and be involved in the child's life if that's what you want. I do, Danica confirmed, but I also think we need to acknowledge that any relationship between us was built on false pretenses. Whatever genuine feelings developed later can't erase that foundation. Samuel nodded, surprised by her insight and unexpected maturity. When do you leave? Next week, she replied. My doctor says it's safe to travel still. I'll send contact information through the attorneys. As she rose to leave, Danica hesitated. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for my part in Riviera's scheme, but for how it hurt your wife. She didn't deserve that. The acknowledgement was small but significant. Perhaps the first completely honest exchange they'd ever had. Good luck in Chicago, Samuel offered, meaning it. After Danica left, Samuel remained seated, reflecting on the strange symmetry of his situation. His professional life, which had seemed destroyed beyond repair, was being cautiously rebuilt with new boundaries and oversight. His personal life, which he had arrogantly assumed he could control and compartmentalize, remained fractured and uncertain. His phone chimed with a message from Ilara. Dinner tonight? Neutral territory. Jeffrey's at 7:30. The restaurant where everything had begun to unravel, where Dean Patterson had inadvertently revealed MIT's interest in recruiting Ilara, setting in motion the chain of events that exposed Samuel's double life and Riviera's conspiracy. The choice of location couldn't be coincidental. I'll be there, he replied, uncertain what the invitation signified, but grateful for any opportunity to continue the difficult, necessary conversations about their future, whatever that might hold. That evening, as Samuel entered Jeffrey's restaurant, he spotted Ilara already seated at a quiet corner table. She wore a simple black dress he didn't recognize. Another small reminder of how their lives had begun to diverge even before the crisis forced them apart. Thank you for coming, she said as he sat opposite her. Thank you for the invitation, Samuel replied, resisting the urge to fill the silence with nervous chatter or premature apologies. After ordering drinks, Ilara regarded him thoughtfully. Jennifer told me about the restructured leadership proposal. Will you accept it? I'm considering it, Samuel answered honestly. It's more than I deserve, given everything that happened. The company still needs your vision, Ilara observed, just with appropriate constraints and oversight. The parallel to their marriage hung unspoken between them. Samuel finally addressed it directly. And us? Is there still something to salvage there as well with appropriate boundaries? Ilara took a measured sip of her wine before responding. I've been asking myself that question for weeks. Even before discovering your affair, our marriage had become a corporate partnership, more than a genuine connection. We were successful colleagues, more than intimate partners. Samuel nodded, the assessment painfully accurate. I failed to appreciate what we had, both personally and professionally. Your research, your insights, your partnership, I took them all for granted. And sought elsewhere what you thought was missing, Ilara completed, with catastrophic results for everyone involved. I have no defense, Samuel acknowledged, only regret and a clearer understanding of what actually matters. Ilara studied him, her analytical mind clearly weighing possibilities and probabilities, as she always had. I'm not prepared to resume our marriage, she said finally. Perhaps ever. Too much trust has been broken, but I am willing to explore what a new relationship might look like. Professional collaboration with clearly defined boundaries, and perhaps eventually a different kind of personal connection. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was more than Samuel had dared hope for. A path forward, however uncertain and changed from what had come before. I would welcome that opportunity, he said sincerely, on whatever terms you set. As their dinner arrived, conversation shifted to safer topics. The restructuring of Fisher Tech, Ilara's research plans, the future applications of the neural adaptation technology now safely protected from military exploitation. For brief moments, Samuel caught glimpses of their earlier connection, the intellectual spark that had first drawn them together, the mutual respect that had formed the foundation of their relationship before ambition and ego had corroded it. Jamie Zhang has been offered the Chief Security Officer position, Ilara mentioned as they finished their meal. Her insights during the crisis proved invaluable. Well deserved, Samuel agreed. Without her courage and foresight, Riviera might have succeeded completely. And Whitman's role was equally crucial, Ilara added, though I'm still processing the fact that the MIT offer was genuine despite being part of Riviera's scheme. Life rarely provides such clean categories of good and bad actors. The observation struck Samuel as profoundly applicable to his own situation, neither wholly villain nor victim, but a complex mixture of poor choices, genuine remorse, and the potential for redemption. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Samuel gathered his courage to ask the question that had been hovering unspoken all evening. Will you accept the MIT position? Split your time between Cambridge and Austin? Ilara nodded. The compromise makes sense professionally. The Advanced Research Division needs my direct oversight, but the MIT connection provides academic freedom and peer review that corporate environments often lack. And personally? Samuel pressed gently. Where will you call home? Ilara considered this as they walked toward the valet stand. For now, Austin remains home. The house in Westlake Hills provides stability during all this transition. She gave him a measuring look. Your downtown apartment is temporary, I understand? Month-to-month lease, Samuel confirmed. I didn't want to make any permanent decisions until things became clearer. They stood in the cool evening air, waiting for their respective cars. The distance between them, physical and emotional, remained substantial but no longer seemed unbridgeable. I've been thinking about something Jamie said during the investigation, Ilara remarked, breaking the momentary silence. About how vulnerabilities in systems aren't just weaknesses to be exploited, but also pathways to deeper understanding and eventual strengthening. The breakdown points to what needs reinforcement. Samuel considered this. Are we talking about neural networks or marriages now? A small smile played at the corner of Ilara's lips, the first he'd seen directed at him in months. Perhaps both. The principles might be more similar than we realize. The valet arrived with Ilara's Tesla first. As she accepted the keys, she turned to Samuel once more. Next week, I'll be presenting the initial framework for the Advanced Research Division to the board. Your input would be valuable if you're willing to collaborate professionally again. I'd like that, Samuel replied, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Not forgiveness, but a cautious step toward a new kind of partnership. As Ilara drove away, Samuel remained on the curb, waiting for his car and reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past weeks. from the pinnacle of success to the depths of betrayal, and back to this uncertain middle ground, not restored to his former position, but not destroyed completely either. A second chance of sorts, though not the one he might have envisioned. His phone chimed with a message from Jennifer Liang. Board unanimously approved the restructured leadership model. Your office will be relocated to the Innovation Center on the 32nd floor. New beginning, fresh perspective. Decision. Samuel gazed at the Austin skyline, the Fisher Tech building prominently illuminated against the night sky. The company he'd built, nearly lost, and now had the opportunity to serve in a different capacity. Like his relationship with Ilara, it would never be the same, but perhaps it could be something more thoughtfully constructed, with stronger ethical foundations and clearer boundaries. I accept, he replied, committing himself to the challenging path ahead. 1 week later, Samuel stood at the podium in Fisher Tech's main conference room, concluding his presentation to the board alongside Ilara. Their joint proposal for the Advanced Research Division had been met with enthusiastic approval, particularly the strict ethical guidelines governing applications of the neural adaptation technology. With proper oversight and collaborative development, Ilara emphasized as they finished, these systems can revolutionize healthcare diagnostics, environmental modeling, and educational accessibility without venturing into weaponization or surveillance applications. After the board members filed out, Samuel and Ilara remained behind, gathering their materials in companionable silence. It wasn't the easy intimacy they'd once shared, but it wasn't the strained tension of recent months either. Something new emerging from the wreckage of what had been destroyed. That went well, Samuel observed. Jennifer seemed particularly impressed with the ethical framework you developed. It's not just mine, Ilara corrected him. Your insights on implementation safeguards were essential. We make a good team professionally when we actually listen to each other. The gentle rebuke was deserved, and Samuel accepted it with a nod. I'm trying to be better at that. Listening, I mean. Not just to you, but to everyone. I've noticed, Ilara acknowledged. She hesitated, then added, I saw the baby's first ultrasound image. Danica sent it through her attorney. Samuel tensed slightly, uncertain how to navigate this delicate territory. Yes, she sent it to me as well. She's settled in Chicago now. A boy, Ilara said quietly. Have you thought about names? The question surprised him. Not just its content, but the calm curiosity behind it. Not yet. That feels presumptuous given the circumstances. Ilara gathered her tablet and notes, considering her next words carefully. Whatever happens between us, Samuel, that child is innocent in all this. And while I can't pretend the situation isn't painful for me, I won't stand in the way of you being a father to him. The generosity of this statement, from a woman who had endured both personal betrayal and professional undermining, humbled Samuel completely. Thank you, he said simply, words inadequate to express his gratitude. As they walked toward the elevator together, Ilara asked, Will you be at the memorial service for Marcus's father this weekend? The question caught Samuel off guard. Harold Chen had been like a second father to him during college, welcoming him into their home for holidays, when Samuel's own family situation had been difficult. I hadn't considered it. Given Marcus's role in everything, I assumed I wouldn't be welcome. Marcus called me yesterday, Ilara revealed. He's under house arrest pending trial, but has permission to attend the service. He specifically asked if we would come. Why would he want us there? Samuel asked, genuinely puzzled. I think he wants to make amends in whatever way possible, Ilara suggested. His father never knew about his betrayal. In Harold's eyes, you were always the son he never had. The mention of Harold Chen brought a rush of memories, family dinners, career advice, the proud smile when Fisher Tech had secured its first major contract. I'll go, Samuel decided, for Harold, not for Marcus. I'll meet you there, Ilara said as they reached the lobby. Separately for now. The qualification, for now, carried more hope than Samuel had dared embrace since their world had unraveled. Not a promise of reconciliation, but an acknowledgement that their current separation might not be permanent. 3 days later, at the memorial service for Harold Chen, Samuel stood at the back of the crowded funeral home, watching as friends and family paid their respects. Marcus sat in the front row, federal agents discreetly positioned nearby, a subtle reminder of his pending legal troubles despite this temporary, compassionate release. Ilara arrived shortly after Samuel, carefully maintaining appropriate distance while exchanging polite greetings. They had agreed to present a united front of respect for Harold, without suggesting any personal reconciliation that might confuse those present. After the formal service, during the reception, Marcus approached them hesitantly, the federal agents maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly monitoring the interaction. "Thank you both for coming," he said quietly. "It would have meant everything to my father." Samuel nodded stiffly, unable to fully bridge the chasm of betrayal despite the solemn occasion. Harold was a good man. He deserved better from all of us. "Yes, he did," Marcus acknowledged, pain evident in his expression. "I keep thinking about what he would say if he knew what I'd done. How I betrayed not just you, Samuel, but everything he taught us about honor and loyalty." "Why did you do it?" Samuel finally asked the question that had haunted him since discovering Marcus's role in the conspiracy. "After everything we built together," Marcus looked away briefly, gathering his thoughts. "It started with genuine concern about the direction of the company, your resistance to exploring certain applications of the technology, your increasingly unilateral decision-making, but it became something else when Riviera approached me. Ambition, resentment, the illusion of greater purpose." He met Samuel's gaze directly. "None of it justifies what I did. The means I chose corrupted whatever legitimate concerns I might have had." Ilara, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke. "The neural adaptation technology will now be developed with strict ethical oversight and collaborative governance. Ironically, the very model that might have prevented this entire situation had it been implemented earlier." Her observation carried no accusation, only a clear-eyed assessment of the systemic failures that had created vulnerabilities for Riviera to exploit. Samuel recognized the wisdom in her words. His own leadership style, with its emphasis on control and unilateral decision-making, had paradoxically weakened the company rather than strengthening it. "I'll be pleading guilty," Marcus informed them quietly. "Full cooperation with prosecutors in exchange for consideration during sentencing. Riviera and his external accomplices will face the heaviest charges." "And Brooke?" Samuel asked, curious about his former legal counsel. "Similar arrangement," Marcus confirmed, though she turned state's evidence earlier in the process, which may work in her favor. As federal agents gently indicated it was time for Marcus to return to his designated seating area, he offered one final pained observation. "The irony is that we could have achieved so much more through honest collaboration than through all this deception. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way." After Marcus departed, Samuel and Ilara stood in thoughtful silence, the weight of his words settling between them. "He's right, you know," Samuel finally said, "about collaboration versus deception, about losing sight of what matters." Ilara nodded, her expression contemplative. "It applies to companies and marriages alike, I suppose. The structures we build are only as strong as the truth that supports them." As they prepared to leave the memorial service separately, Samuel gathered his courage for one final question. "Would you consider having dinner again next week? Still neutral territory, still just exploring possibilities?" Ilara considered this carefully before responding. "Yes, I think I would. Not as husband and wife, not yet as friends even, but as two people with a complicated shared history, trying to find an honest path forward. It wasn't reconciliation or forgiveness. Those would require much more time and demonstration of genuine change. But it was something Samuel hadn't fully allowed himself to hope for. The possibility of building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed, something potentially stronger, precisely because it acknowledged the fractures and vulnerabilities that had existed in the original structure. As Samuel watched Ilara walk toward her car, he thought about the neural adaptation technology that had become the center of this corporate storm. Its fundamental principle was that systems could learn from failure, recalibrating and strengthening themselves through the very process of breaking down and rebuilding. Perhaps humans, like the networks they designed, could follow a similar path, not erasing past failures, but incorporating their lessons into more resilient future architectures. For the first time since his world had imploded, Samuel felt something beyond guilt or regret. A cautious optimism about the difficult, necessary work of reconstruction that lay ahead. Not restoration to what had been before, but something different, potentially stronger, built with clearer vision and deeper understanding of what truly mattered. A clean slate was impossible. Too much had happened for that. But a new chapter, written with painful wisdom earned through catastrophic failure, remained possible. And for now, that possibility, however uncertain, was enough to move forward into the changed landscape of his life. 18 months later, Samuel stood on the observation deck of Fisher Tech's new Cambridge research facility, watching as late autumn leaves swirled across the MIT campus, visible through the expansive windows. The building, a collaborative venture between the university and the company, represented everything the restructured Fisher Tech now stood for: transparency in design with its glass facades, ethical oversight evidenced by the prominent Ethics Advisory Board offices, and true collaborative innovation with open workspaces replacing hierarchical corner offices. "Penny for your thoughts?" Jamie Zhang asked, joining him at the window. Now Fisher Tech's chief security officer, she had overseen the facility's cutting-edge protection systems, designed to safeguard research without the excessive secrecy that had enabled previous corporate malfeasance. "Just reflecting on how much has changed," Samuel replied. 2 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this." "You mean a research center where your ex-wife runs the show and you're the supporting player?" Jamie asked, with the direct candor that had become her trademark. Samuel smiled. "Among other things, yes. The Advanced Research Division under Ilara's leadership had become Fisher Tech's crown jewel, developing applications of neural adaptation technology that were revolutionizing medical diagnostics and environmental modeling. The military applications Riviera had coveted remained firmly off-limits, protected by governance structures that required multiple levels of ethical review for any new implementation. "The FDA approval ceremony starts in 20 minutes, Jamie reminded him. "Jennifer wanted you to review her remarks beforehand." Samuel nodded, following her back inside. The FDA's groundbreaking approval of Fisher Tech's neural diagnostic system for early detection of neurodegenerative diseases represented their first major triumph since the corporate restructuring, validation of the ethical approach Ilara had insisted upon. In the preparation room adjacent to the main auditorium, Jennifer Liang was reviewing her notes, while Ilara made final adjustments to the presentation. The two women had formed an effective leadership partnership, their complementary strengths creating a more balanced corporate culture than Samuel had ever achieved during his tenure as CEO. "Samuel, perfect timing," Jennifer greeted him. "I've emphasized the collaborative nature of the development process, but is there anything else you think we should highlight?" "Maybe acknowledge the Oversight Committee more prominently," he suggested. "Their rigorous testing protocols were key to securing approval so quickly." Ilara looked up from her tablet, offering a small smile of approval. "Good point. The transparency of our testing methodology ultimately accelerated the process rather than hindering it, contrary to what critics suggested. The ease of their professional interaction had been hard-won through months of careful boundary setting and intentional communication. Their personal relationship had evolved more slowly, with even more careful navigation. After the final preparations were complete, Jennifer and Jamie departed to greet arriving dignitaries, leaving Samuel and Ilara alone for a moment. "Nervous?" he asked, noting the slight tension in her shoulders, a tell he recognized from years of shared presentations. "A little," she admitted. "This isn't just a corporate milestone. It's validation of everything we fought for: ethical application of the technology, patient safety prioritized over profit margins, collaborative oversight instead of siloed decision-making." "It's your vision being realized," Samuel acknowledged. "I was just too blind to see its value originally." Ilara adjusted her blazer, her wedding ring noticeably absent, a permanent reminder of choices that couldn't be undone. Yet the bitterness that had initially characterized their interactions had gradually given way to something different, not the intimate connection of marriage, but a tempered respect and carefully cultivated collegiality. "How was your visit with Alexander yesterday?" she asked, referring to Samuel's son with Danica. "Good," Samuel replied, unable to prevent the smile that always accompanied thoughts of the toddler. "He's walking everywhere now, getting into everything. Danica says he has my stubborn determination." "And your eyes," Ilara added, having met the child several times during his visits to Austin. "Will Danica bring him for Thanksgiving next month?" "Yes, same arrangement as last year. She'll stay with her friend in Austin and I'll have Alexander for the long weekend." Samuel hesitated. "Actually, I wanted to ask if you'd be comfortable joining us for dinner one evening while they're in town, just for an hour or so." The question held weight beyond its simple phrasing, While Ilara had been remarkably gracious about Samuel's relationship with his son, actual shared social occasions remained rare and carefully structured. "I think I'd like that," she replied after a moment's consideration. "He's a wonderful child, Samuel. Despite everything, I'm glad he exists in this world." The generosity of this statement, from a woman who had once hoped to build a family with him before his betrayal, shattered those dreams, struck Samuel deeply. "Thank you," he said simply. Before the conversation could continue, Jennifer returned to escort them to the stage. The auditorium was filled with medical professionals, regulatory officials, investors, and media, all gathered to witness the announcement of technology that promised earlier intervention for conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. As Ilara delivered her portion of the presentation, outlining the adaptive learning capabilities that enabled the diagnostic system to identify subtle disease markers years before clinical symptoms appeared, Samuel watched from the side of the stage. Her brilliance, which he had once taken for granted and then nearly lost to MIT entirely, now formed the cornerstone of Fisher Tech's rehabilitation and renewed purpose. During the reception afterward, Samuel found himself approached by a distinguished older gentleman he recognized as the director of neurology from Massachusetts General Hospital. "Mr. Fisher," the physician greeted him. "Remarkable achievement. Your wife's research implementation could change the entire landscape of neurodegenerative disease management." "Ex-wife?" Samuel corrected gently. "And the achievement is primarily hers. I'm just fortunate to still be involved with the company to witness it." The doctor appeared momentarily embarrassed by his error. "Forgive me. I assumed since you were both here." "We maintain a professional relationship," Samuel explained, having grown accustomed to such misconceptions. "Dr. Simmons Fisher leads our research division. I support her work through our innovation center." Later, as the event wound down, Samuel found himself alone on the building's rooftop garden, a quiet refuge from the activity below. The Boston skyline sparkled in the early evening darkness, so different from the Austin landscape he'd once considered the backdrop to his success. "There you are," Ilara's voice came from behind him. "Jennifer's looking for you." "The governor wants photos with the leadership team." "Just needed a moment," Samuel explained as she joined him at the railing. They stood in comfortable silence watching the city lights. So much had changed between them, their marriage irrevocably broken, their professional dynamics fundamentally altered, yet something valuable remained, purified rather than destroyed by the crucible they'd survived together. "I received another offer from Whitman yesterday," Ilara mentioned casually. "Full professorship, my own research center." Samuel tensed slightly. Despite their separation, the prospect of Ilara leaving Fisher Tech entirely still triggered anxiety. "Are you considering it?" "No," she replied simply. "What we're building here matters more. The structure we've created, the oversight mechanisms, the ethical frameworks, the collaborative approaches, they're making a real difference in how technology serves humanity. I wouldn't trade that for academic prestige." Relief washed over Samuel, followed by profound gratitude that despite everything that had transpired between them personally, this shared professional vision remained intact. "Riviera's final appeal was denied," he mentioned, referring to news they'd received that morning. 12 years without possibility of early parole." Ilara nodded solemnly. "Justice, I suppose. Though sometimes I wonder if any of this would have happened if we'd structured Fisher Tech differently from the beginning. More collaborative governance, stronger ethical oversight, less concentrated power. The Arthur Riviera Memorial Ethics Committee has a certain irony to it," Samuel observed wryly, referring to the oversight board that now approved all major technological applications at Fisher Tech. Ilara's laugh was genuine, a sound that had once been common between them and was now precious in its rarity. "Indeed, though I prefer to think of it as the Ilara Simmons Fisher I Told You So Committee." As they prepared to return downstairs for the final photographs, Samuel paused, needing to voice the realization that had struck him while watching the day's events unfold. "We built something better from the wreckage," he said quietly. "Not just the company, but this, whatever this is between us now. It's not what we had before, and it's certainly not what I would have chosen given the chance to go back and make different decisions. But it has its own integrity, its own value." Ilara considered this thoughtfully. "Systems that break catastrophically often rebuild stronger at precisely the fracture points," she observed. It's a fundamental principle in adaptive networks, and perhaps in human relationships as well. They rejoined the celebration downstairs, moving through the crowd separately, yet somehow connected by the shared understanding of their complex journey. Not husband and wife any longer, not even friends in the conventional sense, but partners in something that transcended easy categorization. A collaboration forged in betrayal's fire and tempered by hard-earned wisdom. Later that night, as Samuel prepared to return to his Cambridge apartment, he received a text message from Danica with a new photo of Alexander playing with building blocks. He's creating quite the tower. Engineering genes coming through. Samuel smiled at the image of his son, the unexpected gift from a relationship built on deception, but which had improbably produced something genuinely precious. Like his restructured relationship with Ilara, like the transformed Fisher tech itself, Alexander represented possibility emerging from the wreckage of catastrophic failure, not erasing the past, but creating a future that integrated its painful lessons. As he typed a response to Danica, Samuel glanced at the illuminated Fisher tech sign visible from his window. The company name remained the same, but everything it stood for had been transformed. Much like the man who had founded it, lost it, and found his way back to it in a different, perhaps wiser capacity. Some betrayals destroyed beyond repair. Others, if faced with sufficient courage and honesty, could become the foundation for something different, but equally valuable. Structures rebuilt precisely at the points of greatest vulnerability, stronger for having broken and been mindfully reconstructed. Not the life Samuel had planned, certainly not the one he had once believed he wanted, but walking the path of genuine accountability had led him somewhere unexpected, a life with clearer purpose, deeper understanding, and perhaps most surprisingly, authentic peace with the irreversible consequences of choices that could never be unmade. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now, and we'll see you there.